Chapter 28:14. On my own. Upon hearing Fat Cat's voice, Nye Tion's pupils shrunk and shone with a blazing light. He felt as if he had fallen into a swamp. Fat Cat's words instantly gave him hope. Nye Tion, these 13 light spots are the 13 boundary eyes of the formation. Then, the little Fat Cat's voice sounded again. This formation is very complicated. There are 13 formation eyes supporting each other. You must destroy all 13 formation eyes at the same time in order to break the formation. If you can't destroy all 13 boundary eyes at the same time and leave one behind, the remaining boundary eyes will condense again. Do you understand? Understood. Nye Tion nodded heavily, but his expression was extremely ugly. The 13 boundary eyes had to be destroyed at the same time. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to break the formation. This wasn't what Nye Tion was most worried about. The most troublesome thing was that he was entangled by the berserk scarlet tide and couldn't escape. In that sort of situation, not to mention destroying 13 spirit formation eyes, he was unable to even destroy a single one. At this moment, someone had to come out and block the berserk scarlet tide for him. But who among the people below could replace him? Jing Yue and Jing Rue naturally couldn't come out, and the people around Nye Tion were suppressed by the formation and weren't strong enough. The 3 shadow guards couldn't even protect themselves. Nye Tion, you must let someone else come out and block the berserk scarlet tide for you. Fat Cat, of course, was aware of Nye Tion's predicament and shouted. Nye Tion frowned and said in a deep voice, "Each of them can block the berserk scarlet tide." Among the people below, the ones most likely to block the berserk scarlet tide were Zhu Shan and Zhu He. If the 2 of them used unstoppable mountains and rivers, they should be able to block the berserk scarlet tide. But Nye Tion wasn't at ease. Not only were Zhu Shan and Zhu He's lives at stake, but the lives of the others were also at stake. Once the giant mountains and rivers failed to stop it, the 2 of them wouldn't be the only ones to die. Everyone below would die as well. Moreover, he guessed that with Dugukan's ruthlessness, once he realized that he was about to break the barrier, he would definitely change his attack method. At that time, the Mountain River brothers would definitely not be able to stop him. I can only rely on myself. Nye Tion's mind raced, and he made a decision in an instant. He did not count on anyone but himself. Puff, puff, puff. In the next moment, Nye Tion's body trembled. Instantly, blood chi sprayed out and filled the air, causing the surrounding space to turn crimson. Nye Tion, what are you doing? Fat Cat screamed, not knowing what Nye Tion was doing. Nye Tion! Boss! When the people below saw this scene, they all cried out in shock. Dugukan's eyes darkened as he sneered. Brat, you can't hold on any longer, can you? You want to use blood chi to resist the impact of the tides? How much blood chi do you have to burn? He felt that Nye Tion could not hold on any longer and could only make a final struggle by burning his blood chi to resist the tide. Boom! At that moment, as the blood chi around Nye Tion raged, the demon and God's power within him was released as well. The remaining sword will surged out at the same time, causing the sword aura around him to become violent in an instant. In the next moment, something strange happened. Behind his figure, a figure that looked exactly like him appeared. Sword-willed doppelganger! Dugukan frowned and exclaimed. He never thought that Nye Tion would burn his blood chi at that moment to activate his sword will and create a sword will clone. Wasn't he looking for death by doing this? Even his original body could not do anything to the barrier. What could a sword will clone do? Nye Tion. The people below were also stunned. Their eyes trembled as they did not know what Nye Tion was going to do. Nye Tion, by doing this, you have undoubtedly pushed your martial body to its limit. You only have one chance. Fat Cat immediately saw through Nye Tion's plan and shouted. Nye Tion used his original body to resist the tides and the sword will clone to break the barrier. He was now at the peak of sword martial unity. The strength of the sword will clone was not much weaker than his original body. However, the sword will clone was only a clone after all. It only had one chance. After that, if it could not break the barrier, Nye Tian and the others would undoubtedly die. One chance is enough, Nye Tian said in a deep voice. His eyes were firm and sharp. When he showed such a look, it meant that he had full confidence in himself. Stinking brat, I want to see what kind of waves a little fish like you can stir up, Dogu-ken said coldly. He was very arrogant and did not take Nye Tian's sword will clone seriously. Dogu-ken, you will see soon. The waves I stir up will blind your dog eyes, Nye Tianling said coldly. His tone was low and extremely provocative. Dogu-ken was furious. He wanted to rush into the barrier and tear Nye Tian to pieces. But he did not dare to do so. Once he entered the barrier, he would definitely be no match for Nye Tian. At that moment, Nye Tian's sword will clone shot into the sky. The sword will around it was violent and fierce. Even the blood tide could not get close. 9 limits of starry sky, 3rd limit, heaven slash. Then, Nye Tian murmured. The sword aura around the sword will clone suddenly became violent. Then, the sword will clone exploded. It turned into 13 sword shadows in the air, and rushed towards 13 different directions in the barrier. So strong! When the people below saw this scene, their eyes trembled violently, and they exclaimed in their hearts, "Who would have thought that Nye Tian could still explode with such terrifying power at a time like this?" Outside the barrier, Dogu-ken was stunned for a moment. Then, looking at the direction of the 13 swords, his heart sank as he cried out, "Oh no!" At that moment, he suddenly realized that Nye Tian wanted to use the power of the sword will clone to destroy the 13 eyes of the barrier. The dozens of ward's masters also widened their eyes at the same time. Disbelief was written all over their faces. But it was too late. The 13 sword shadows roared like dragons and rushed towards the 13 eyes of the barrier. Boom! Boom! Bang! In the next moment, muffled sounds of explosions rang out from where the 13 sword shadows landed. The 13 eyes of the barrier were instantly destroyed. The eyes of the barrier were the most concealed part of the barrier, as well as the weakest part of the barrier. Just like the formation core of a formation, once it was destroyed, the entire barrier would not be able to withstand it. Impossible! Dogu-ken was stunned by the scene before him and let out a strange cry. Bang! Before he could finish his sentence, a loud explosion could be heard in the sky. The entire barrier suddenly collapsed and turned into a visible ripple in the air. The ripple spread out and dissipated. The dozens of ward's masters stood there in a daze, as if they were still in a dream. The blood tide in the air disappeared in an instant. Puff! At that moment, Nye Tian's body trembled violently and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He could no longer hold on and fell from the sky. Boss! Zhu Shan was the first to react. He yelled and flew over. Chapter 28:15. Never in his wildest dreams had Dogu-ken thought that the formation would be destroyed. With such an exquisite and complicated formation, even the strongest spirit formation master of the myriad domains would need a very long time to find the 13 spirit formation eyes. Nye Tian was only a peak god level trash. How could he find the 13 spirit formation eyes? Dogu-ken could not figure it out no matter how hard he tried. Why? At that moment, he had lost his mind and attacked furiously. He was determined to kill Nye Tian on the spot. He was one of the 4 elders of the Myriad Region's #1 assassin organization, the Dark Knight. He specialized in the Tao of spirit formations, but his martial prowess was not weak either. He was already a rank 7 pseudo-sacred. In his rage, the power that he unleashed was enough to destroy heaven and earth. Boom! A huge, sinister, skeletal hand appeared high up in the sky and smashed down towards Nye Tian with a loud rumble. Nye Tian was on the brink of death. Not to mention blocking the skeletal hand, he would be instantly turned into ashes if he was even touched by the aura. "Boss!" Zhu Shan cried out in fear when he saw the skeletal hand coming down from the sky. He immediately increased his speed. However, he was only a rank 7 pseudo-sacred. Even if he managed to catch Nie Tian, he would only die together with Nie Tian. "Dugu-kan, do you think we're heir?" At the moment of life and death, a deep and vigorous energy was heard. Following that, a soaring aura appeared and rose into the sky like a raging wave. Asterisk whoosh. Asterisk at the same time, a red light appeared. The aura was vast, yet extremely gentle. It immediately wrapped around Nie Tian. Asterisk rumble. Asterisk in the next moment, the giant skeletal hand fell, but it was blocked by the soaring aura and shattered in the void. Following this, a figure appeared in the sky, staring at Dugu-kan with a pair of cold eyes. It was a shadow guard of the Jing clan, a rank 8 pseudo-sacred expert. It was obvious that he had been suppressed for far too long. At that moment, he had unleashed all of his strength. Under the stimulation of the anger in his heart, he became even fiercer. On the other side, Nie Tian was caught by Zhu Shan. "Boss, are you alright?" Zhu Shan could feel that Nie Tian's aura was very weak, and he shouted anxiously. "I won't die," Nie Tian said with difficulty, and the corners of his mouth actually pulled up into a smile. "Nie Tian." Jing Yue also arrived and looked at Nie Tian nervously, fearing that something would happen to him. Nie Tian smiled, indicating that he was fine. The others quickly came and surrounded Nie Tian. "Your Royal Highness, what should we do with these people?" A dark guard looked at Jing Yue and asked. "Kill." Jing Yue's beautiful eyes were incomparably fierce. The corners of her lips twitched as she spat out a single word in a cold voice. "Yes." The 3 shadow guards nodded in unison and immediately moved. They were like ferocious tigers that had been trapped in a cage for a long time, fiercely pouncing over. 2 of the shadow guards rushed towards the dozen or so boundary masters, their figures leaving wails and howls wherever they went. Those boundary masters were all demi-saint and pseudo-saint, but their martial prowess was much weaker and simply could not stand against the shadow guards of the Jing family. In the blink of an eye, the dozen boundary masters were directly killed. On the other side, one of the shadow guards of the Jing family rushed towards Dugu-kan and slammed his palm down. A world-shaking might burst out, as if the very void itself was about to be torn apart. "Let's go." Dugu-kan growled, and a scroll appeared in his hand. He immediately opened it, and the power of a formation surged out, shrouding his entire body. Boom! Boom! That sky-shaking palm landed on the formation, but it actually could not break it. It was obvious that this was a life-saving item that Dugu-kan carried with him, and it was not something that could be easily broken. "Brat, your name is Nie Tian, isn't it? I, Dugu-kan, will remember you." Within the formation, Dugu-kan's pair of skeletal eyes glared at Nie Tian. He had killed countless people in his life, and even a pseudo-saint ranker had been slain before. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that he, one of the 4 great elders of the Dark Knight clan, would fall at the hands of a god pinnacle scum. At this very moment, Nie Tian was on his kill list. If he could not kill Nie Tian, Dugu-kan would feel a thorn in his back, and he would not be able to eat or sleep in peace. "Dugu-kan, I'll remember you as well." By then, Nie Tian had already managed to stand up, and his eyes stared straight at Dugu-kan without flinching as he replied coldly. "Very well." Dugu-kan roared fiercely and said coldly, "We shall meet again, Nie Tian." Then, his silhouette flashed. His speed was extremely fast, and he disappeared without a trace in an instant. It seemed like the formation he had activated not only had a defensive function, but it also increased his speed. Dugu-kan had failed miserably in this mission. The dozen or so boundary masters who were killed were trained by the Dark Knight clan using countless resources. Yet, they were mercilessly slaughtered by the Jing clan's shadow guards. More importantly, he had failed his mission. He had failed. Dugukin had joined the Dark Knight clan when he was young, and he had carried out tens of thousands of missions in his life. This was his first time failing a mission, and it was to someone he normally wouldn't even look at. Nye Tian had already become the greatest humiliation he had ever suffered in his life. Nye Tian, I, Dugukan, swear that I will kill you. Just as Dugukan's silhouette completely disappeared, his angry roar came from the void in the distance. From this, it could be seen how ruthless he was towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian, on the other hand, smiled faintly without much expression on his face. Following that, everyone calmed down and focused their attention on Nye Tian. Nye Tian had already recovered a little. The wounds on his body were slowly healing, and his face had regained some color. No one could understand how Nye Tian had found the 13 boundary eyes. Nye Tian didn't say much. Instead, he had the golden Leo come out of the 9 extremities. Everyone then sat on the golden Leo. With the golden feathered eagle killed, they could only rely on the golden Leo for the rest of the journey. Fortunately, the golden Leo was also very domineering. The power of the golden flame surged around it, and it shone with golden light. It was very magnificent, in line with the temperament of the royal family. Even if they reached the Xiantian dynasty, it wouldn't be too embarrassing. Nye Tian, thank you so much for this time, Jing Yue said very solemnly as they sat on the golden Leo. She came to Nye Tian's side and said very solemnly. Nye Tian had recovered quite a bit. He smiled faintly and said, Your Highness is too polite. Our duty as bodyguards is to ensure that Your Highness reaches the Xiantian dynasty safely. What I did just now was within our duty. Brother Nye, Jing Rue will forever remember your kindness. Jing Rue also walked over and said solemnly. His eyes were very sincere, no longer as fake as before. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, Your Highness is too kind. At this time, even the 3 Jing family bodyguards were very respectful to Nye Tian, as if Nye Tian was also their master. This time, it had been too dangerous. If it weren't for Nye Tian, everyone would have died in that boundary. Afterwards, Jing Yue became even more cautious and constantly changed the route. Chapter 28:16. A brutal scene. We're a few days late, but luckily we've arrived safely. Jing Rue looked down at the Xiantian imperial city and let out a deep sigh. The golden Leo was not a flying mount after all, so it was not as fast as the golden feathered eagles. Moreover, Jing Yue kept changing their route, so they were a few days late. Sister, let's send the signal to let the people of the Xiantian imperial city know that we've arrived. Jing Rue looked at Jing Yue and bowed. All right. Jing Yue nodded and took out a red badge. She handed it to Nye Tian and said, Nye Tian, this is the Holy Moon badge. You can send the signal. Nye Tian had fully recovered by now. He nodded and took the Holy Moon badge, ready to send the signal. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. However, at that moment, countless figures suddenly flew out from the Xiantian imperial city at high speed. They seemed to be in a panic as they flew in all directions. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed as he looked over, and he discovered that these figures were very strange. They all had a pair of wings on their backs, and their hands and feet were shackled by shackles. Even so, these people with wings were still very fast. They were like arrows that had left the bow, shuttling back and forth in the sky. The Heavenly Feather Tribe. Jing Yue exclaimed in surprise when she saw these people. These people are wearing shackles. They must be slaves. Jing Rue said in a deep voice. Help, don't kill us. At that moment, the people of the Heavenly Feather Tribe suddenly panicked and began to cry for help. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. In the next moment, countless arrows suddenly flew down from the sky above the Xiantian imperial city. They were like a dark cloud that rolled down from the sky. It was obvious that the rain of arrows was meant to kill the people of the Heavenly Feather Tribe. Help, no. Instantly, miserable screams could be heard from the sky. Most of the people of the Heavenly Feather Tribe were pierced by the arrows and died on the spot. However, there were a few people who were fast enough to escape the range of the rain of arrows. Boom, boom, boom. However, at this moment, balls of blazing fireballs fell from the sky, and the entire world was instantly dyed bright red. Ah! The Heavenly Feather clan members who had just escaped the rain of arrows were bombarded by the fireballs and killed. The scene was extremely tragic and tragic. Nye furrowed his brows and his face instantly darkened. He could not figure out who would be so cruel as to kill these Heavenly Feather race people. Even if these people were slaves, they were still living beings. How could they be killed so cruelly? In the blink of an eye, only one of the thousands of Sky Feather tribesmen was left. Nye gaze locked onto that figure, and his heart involuntarily shuddered. What he saw was a little girl who seemed to be in her teens. She seemed different from the other members of the Heavenly Feather clan, as she had 2 pairs of pure white wings on her back. At a certain moment, the little girl also caught sight of Nye. Her eyes were crystal clear, like the stars in the night sky. She did not speak, and her face was expressionless. However, her eyes were clearly waiting for someone to intervene and save her life. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, fireballs kept falling from the sky, all of which were concentrated on attacking the little girl. The little girl seemed to be much faster than the other members of the Heavenly Feather clan because she had 2 pairs of wings. She dodged left and right, nimbly dodging the dense rain of fireballs, and actually flew in the direction of Nye and the others. Nye gaze froze. Then, he moved, preparing to intervene and save the little girl. Brother Nye. However, Jingrui, who was beside him, extended his hand and stopped him. He shook his head at him, clearly indicating that he should not intervene. Nye gaze darkened, and he directly broke free from Jingrui's grasp. Then, his figure flashed, and he flew towards the little girl. He wasn't some kind of savior, but he couldn't stand by and watch a little girl die without doing anything. Boss! Ju Shan and Ju he cried out in shock when they saw Nye rushing out. In the sky, the little girl seemed to be tired. Her speed had obviously slowed down, and she was almost hit by the fireballs a few times. Her speed was very fast, but her strength was very weak. It seemed that she was only at the Heavenly Emperor realm. If she was hit by the fireballs, she would definitely die. Seeing this, Nye astral soul wings appeared on his back, and he instantly increased his speed. Finally, the instant a fireball fell, he reached the little girl's side. He stretched out his hand and pulled the little girl over. At the same time, he slapped out and shattered the fireball in the air. The little girl suddenly raised her head, and her clear eyes stared at Nye. However, she did not speak, and she only nodded and thanked Nye. Don't worry, you're fine now. Nye nodded, then activated the astral soul shield. His figure flickered a few times and he returned to the Golden Leo. Only after he landed did he have the chance to carefully observe the little girl. The little girl looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. Her hands and feet were shackled, and her face was covered in dust. However, it could not hide her exquisite features. She would definitely be a femme fatale when she grew up. Brother Nye, you shouldn't have saved her. At this moment, Jingrui took a step forward and shook his head. Nye glanced at Jingrui, his expression a little downcast, but he did not say anything. Jingrui. Jingyue called out to him, indicating that he should stop talking. Your Highness, do you know what's going on? Nye handed the little girl over to Ju Shan behind him, then looked at Jingyue and asked in a low voice. Jingyue nodded and sighed. The people you saw just now were all from the Heavenly Feather clan. Their hands and feet were shackled, so they should be slaves. I heard that Crown Prince Xiantian is a violent and bloodthirsty person who enjoys torturing and killing slaves for pleasure. I think that Crown Prince Xiantian intentionally released these slaves and then killed them all. Jingrui didn't let you act just now because he was afraid that you would anger him by saving them. Nie Tian frowned, his expression downcast. After a moment of silence, he said, "Your Highness, isn't the person you want to marry Crown Prince Xiantian?" "Yes." Jing Yue frowned slightly, a trace of helplessness flashing through her eyes as she nodded. Nie Tian's expression changed and his gaze grew even more downcast. He hadn't expected that Crown Prince Xiantian would be such a cruel person. Even if these Heavenly Feather clan members were his slaves, he shouldn't have tortured and killed them like this. Moreover, many of the Heavenly Feather clan members had been killed just now were children. How could someone be so cruel as to kill for pleasure? What Nie Tian couldn't understand was why Jing Yue would marry Crown Prince Xiantian even though she knew he was such a person. Chapter 28:17. Prince Xuantian. The figure in the sky spoke coldly. His eyes were cold and filled with a murderous aura. It was as if he was a demon that had just walked out of hell. Nie Tian stared into that person's eyes and couldn't help but narrow his eyes. The murderous aura on this person was extremely dense and frightening. Of all the people Nie Tian had met so far, only 7 kills of the 3 demonic heart bodies had a killing intent that could compare to this person's. But there was a difference between 7 kills killing intent and this person's. 7 kills killing intent was innate, but this person's killing intent seemed to have been slowly nurtured by killing non-stop. Nie Tian had already guessed that this person was the Xiantian dynasty's crown prince. Jing Yue had said that Crown Prince Xiantian was violent and bloodthirsty, and that he took pleasure in killing. It was indeed true. At this moment, Crown Prince Xuantian's murderous eyes were fixed on Nie Tian. His icy killing intent was almost tangible as it enveloped Nie Tian's entire body. Nie Tian could already feel a slight pressure from tens of thousands of meters away. "Your Highness, we are." Jing Rue stepped forward and was about to reveal his identity. "Slaughter them." But before he could finish, Crown Prince Xiantian cut him off. The latter's voice was cold and his eyes were completely devoid of humanity. Boom, boom, boom. As soon as Prince Profound Heaven's voice rang out, countless huge fireballs suddenly appeared in the sky. Like meteors falling from the heavens, they blotted out the sky and blotted out the earth as they smashed down towards Nie Tian and the others. In an instant, the heavens and earth turned fiery red. A scorching aura spread out, causing one to almost stop breathing. These fireballs were at least 10 times larger than the ones that had killed the Heavenly Wings clansmen. Their aura and power were also tens or even hundreds of times stronger. Even a weaker false sage cultivator would not be able to withstand it. The huge fireballs connected together and directly spread into a boundless sea of fire, majestically pressing down. Boom, boom, boom. At this critical moment, 3 figures suddenly appeared in the void. They were the 3 Dark Guards. The 3 Dark Guards hovered in the air, releasing their auras wildly. They condensed into 3 shields that enveloped the huge golden Leo. Bang, bang, bang. In the next instant, a huge fireball fell and bombarded the shield, but it directly shattered. An expert. Crown Prince Xuantian's eyes darkened as he waved his hand. Instantly, the fireball in the air stopped. "You're from the Holy Moon Dynasty?" Prince Xiantian seemed to have calmed down quite a bit. The murderous intent in his eyes receded a little as he asked coldly. "Your Royal Highness, I'm Jing Rue, the 2nd Prince of the Holy Moon Dynasty. This is my royal sister, the eldest princess of the Holy Moon Dynasty. We're here to marry." Jing Rue took a step forward and said in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. Crown Prince Xiantian let out a strange sound as he stared at Jing Yue. His lips curled into a smile as he spoke. "So you are Jing Yue, my future Crown Prince consort." At this moment, Crown Prince Xiantian looked at Jing Yue with a strange expression. There was a hint of greed in his eyes. However, this greed was not the slightest desire between a man and a woman. Instead, it was a bloodlust. It was as if he desired to kill Jing Yue with his own hands. Nie Tian looked into Crown Prince Xuantian's eyes, and could not help but feel a chill in his heart. This was the first time he had seen someone so bloodthirsty. To be able to reveal uncontrollable murderous intent upon seeing his future half, how ruthless was this person? I'm Jing Yue. Jing Yue nodded. Her reaction was very calm and she did not say anything else. Jing Yue, you're late. Crown Prince Xiantian squeezed out a cold smile. But it's fine. It's good that you're here. Your Highness, can we enter the city now? Jing Rui saw that Jing Yue did not want to talk to Crown Prince Xiantian. Don't be in such a hurry. Let's deal with the matter at hand first. Crown Prince Xiantian smiled coldly and locked his gaze on Nie Tian. It was obvious that he was referring to the matter at hand when Nie Tian saved the Sky Wing Girl. Your Highness, what do you want? Jing Rui frowned, unable to hide the worry in his eyes. He was very worried that Crown Prince Xiantian would not let this matter go and make things difficult for Nie Tian. It's very simple. Crown Prince Xiantian laughed coldly. Not just anyone can save my slave. If this brat dares to touch my slave, then he should be prepared to die. Die. Jing Rui frowned and his expression froze. He had not expected that Crown Prince Xiantian would want Nie Tian's life. You are guests who came with Jing Yue, so I can let you go. Crown Prince Xiantian laughed, then locked his gaze on Nie Tian. His eyes turned cold as he said, but you must die. Only killing Nie Tian was the biggest concession he could make. If it wasn't for Jing Yue, everyone here would have died. Your Highness, Nie Tian is the leader of our bodyguard. You cannot kill him. Jing Rui frowned. I don't care who he is, he must die today. Crown Prince Xiantian was very determined. Nie Tian frowned. He did not expect this Crown Prince Xiantian to be so domineering in addition to his bloodthirsty nature. Your Highness, what if I want to protect him? Jing Yue asked with a complicated expression. She did not want to speak, but Nie Tian could not die. Your Highness, do you really want to protect this person? Crown Prince Xiantian was taken aback. He did not expect Nie Tian to be so important to Jing Yue. Jing Yue didn't say anything else and nodded directly. Crown Prince Xiantian frowned as if thinking about something. After a while, his eyes flashed and he laughed strangely. Since your Highness has spoken, I must give you face. This brat can live, but he must do something for me. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he stepped forward and asked coldly, what is it? He couldn't hold it in any longer, but with Jing Yue and Jing Rui at the side, he couldn't say anything. It's a very simple matter. Crown Prince Xiantian smiled coldly and locked his gaze on the girl from the Sky Feather Clan. This lowly slave of the Sky Feather Clan does not deserve to live. Since you've saved her, it's up to you to kill her. As soon as he spoke, the little girl from the Heavenly Feather Clan shuddered. It was clear that she was extremely frightened. Nie Tian frowned. He did not expect Crown Prince Xiantian to ask him to do something like this. He had just saved this girl. If he killed her now, he would be even crueler than Crown Prince Xiantian. Brat, I want to see you kill the person you saved with my own eyes. Crown Prince Xiantian spoke coldly when Nie Tian did not respond. His eyes flashed with a perverted sense of satisfaction. It was as if watching someone kill gave him a sense of satisfaction. Chapter 28:18. I must protect her. Crown Prince Xuantian's cruelty had far exceeded Nie Tian's expectations. He couldn't kill an innocent little girl. Humph! Crown Prince Xiantian suddenly laughed. It was an extremely cold laugh as he stared at Nie Tian. Kid, you're quite interesting. But I like to force others to do things against their will. You don't want to kill this lowly slave, but I'll let you. If you want her to live, then you can exchange your life for hers. If you die, then she can live. Do you think your life is more important, or the life of this lowly slave? Crown Prince Xiantian laughed coldly. His face was terrifyingly twisted, sending shivers down one's spine. They couldn't understand how such a cruel person could exist in this world. Nie Tian's expression was gloomy. After a long silence, he finally spoke. Humans are divided into strong and weak, not noble and lowly. In my eyes, slaves and emperors are all humans. There's no difference. I'm not a saint. I won't sacrifice my life to save someone I've never met. But if I can save someone, I definitely won't watch her die. My life or her life, you can't take it away today. His voice wasn't loud and was extremely flat, but when it entered everyone's ears, every single word was sonorous and powerful, causing them to be unable to help but be moved. Jing Yue and Jing Rui glanced at Nie Tian at the same time. They hadn't expected him to be so persistent for the sake of a sky feather slave. If they were in his shoes, they definitely wouldn't have made it this far. Everyone present was a martialist. Which one of their hands hadn't been stained with blood? Even people of Jing Yue and Jing Rui's statuses had killed many people. When a person killed many people, they would develop a disregard for life. However, people like Nie Tian, who were both decisive in killing and cherished life, were very rare. It was a bit contradictory. After all, Nie Tian had killed so many people. Why would he care about someone who had nothing to do with him? Nie Tian had his own principles when doing things. He had indeed killed a lot of people, but he believed that the people he had killed were all people who deserved to die. However, this little girl from the Heavenly Feather clan did not deserve to die. Since he had encountered it and interfered, he had to get involved to the end. The Crown Prince's expression darkened after hearing Nie Tian's words, but he soon revealed a chilling smile. Brat, you are the first person to dare act so arrogantly in front of me. This Crown Prince wants to see how you will survive today. In the next moment, his eyes suddenly turned cold, and he directly roared, "Attack!" Yes. Following which, a voice rang out from the void. The space trembled slightly as a black light shot out from the void. Like an arrow piercing through the air, it flew towards Nie Tian. In the blink of an eye, Nie Tian felt a bone-piercing coldness. It was obvious that the person who attacked from the void was the secret guard of the Crown Prince. His strength was definitely at the advanced pseudo-sage level. The sudden attack from an expert of this level was definitely not something that Nie Tian could defend against. Who dares kill Nie Tian? At the same time, the three Jing family secret guards roared in unison and attacked at the same time. Kaboom! There was a muffled explosion in the void as the black light was sent flying by the huge impact. High up in the sky, the black light revealed its true appearance. It was an elderly martialist in black robes. The sudden turn of events made Crown Prince Xuantian's expression darken. He hadn't expected that the Jing family's dark guard would dare to attack without Jing Yue's order. Your Highness! The three secret guards retreated slightly and bowed at Jing Yue. It was indeed inappropriate for them to attack without Jing Yue's permission. You did well. Jing Yue nodded slightly, not reprimanding the three. The situation had been urgent. If they had waited for her to speak, it would have been too late. These three secret guards were also people who valued friendship, and would always remember Nie Tian's kindness. If it were not for Nie Tian, they would have died in the barrier set up by Dugu Kan and the others. For the sake of this debt, they couldn't just watch Nie Tian get killed. Jing Yue, what is the meaning of this? Crown Prince Xuantian's gaze shifted. He seemed to have calmed down a lot as he looked at Jing Yue. He clearly did not expect that Nie Tian was so important to Jing Yue. The attack just now could be said to be an accident, but it could also lead to a war between the two majestic empires. Jing Yue was a smart person. There was no way she did not understand this. However, her reaction was very calm. She had clearly made up her mind to protect Nie Tian. I just said that I want to protect him, Jing Yue said indifferently. Her voice was calm, but it was very firm. Interesting. Crown Prince Xuantian's eyes darkened and his expression became very strange. His eyes locked onto Nye Tian again and he said darkly, "I'm curious. Who is this kid? Why does the princess care so much about him? Could it be that he is her royal highness' little lover?" "Xiao Teng, watch your mouth." Jing Rui's expression darkened as soon as Crown Prince Xiantian spoke. He had even called Crown Prince Xiantian by his name. Xiao Tang was Crown Prince Xuantian's name. Jing Yue's pretty face darkened in an instant, but she didn't say anything. Nye Tian's expression was cold as he stared straight at Crown Prince Xiantian. "Looks like if this Crown Prince wants to kill this brat, all of you will fall out with this Crown Prince." Suddenly, Xiao Tang gave a cold laugh and said in a strange tone, "I'm going to protect him." Jing Yue responded faintly, not saying a word more. Xiao Tang's expression darkened as if in deep thought. Then he smiled strangely and said, "Very well, I will give the future crown princess some face and let this kid live." "Thank you, Your Highness." Jing Yue's eyes trembled slightly before she expressed her gratitude. Nye Tian frowned and his expression did not look good. He could tell that Xiao Tang was not the kind of person who would give up easily. The fact that he had not killed him meant that he was planning something else. To prevent any accidents, he had the little girl from the Sky Feather clan enter the 9 extremities. "Everyone, we can enter the city now." Xiao Tang smiled faintly. His cold gaze swept across Nye Tian's body as he thought to himself, "Brat, I'll let you live for 2 more days. If you walk out of the city alive, my name will no longer be Xiao Tang. Let's go." Jing Yue nodded. Nye Tian's group then entered the imperial city of Xiantian. Jean Anne's giant figure walked on the streets of the imperial city with a domineering aura. Moments later, they arrived outside the imperial palace. Everything had been set up in advance in the imperial palace to welcome their arrival. Chapter 28-19. Gravity Barrier. When Nye Tian heard Xiao Tang's voice, he couldn't help but stare. He didn't think that Xiao Tang would actually ask Ji Chou-Wu to take off her mask at this time. But he knew that under Ji Chou-Wu's mask, there was a secret that wouldn't be easily taken off. But last time, when Ji Chou-Wu wanted to take off her mask, he was stopped by Nye Tian. Xiao Tang wanted Ji Chou-Wu to take off her mask in this kind of public occasion. Would the latter be willing? Out of Nye Tian's expectations, Ji Chou-Wu actually nodded slightly and started to take off her mask. Zhu Shan, Zhu He and the others beside her were stunned, looking over in astonishment, clearly very curious. Speaking of which, very few people knew what Ji Chou-Wu looked like. Probably even in Saint Soul Academy, there were very few people who had seen Ji Chou-Wu's face. At this moment, when Ji Chou-Wu took off her mask, Zhu Shan, Zhu He and the others were naturally very surprised. But Ji Chou-Wu was very calm. She directly took off her mask, revealing an ordinary face, no different from a normal person. Her face wasn't very pretty, far from being devastatingly beautiful, but it was very pleasant to look at, making people feel more and more pleasing to the eye. But when Nye Tian looked at Ji Chou-Wu now, his gaze froze, a hint of hesitation flashed across his face. He was very sure that Ji Chou-Wu's face right now was different from the face he saw that day. Although he only saw half of Ji Chou-Wu's face that day, he remembered it very clearly. It was definitely a beautiful face. At this moment, Ji Chou-Wu's face was definitely another person's. Ji Chou-Wu seemed to know that Nye Tian would be surprised. She glanced at him and smiled faintly. She should have long known that someone would ask her to take off her mask, so she made preparations in advance and used some kind of method to change her appearance. Nye Tian frowned, thinking in his heart, "Let's go." Xiao Tang glanced at Ji Chou-Wu, did not find anything abnormal, and said indifferently. Then, Jing Yue took the initiative to step forward, pulling Xiao Tang and stepped into the palace. Jing Rui and Nye Tian followed closely behind them, while Zhu Shan, Zhu He, and the others followed behind. In the imperial palace, a golden carpet was laid out. Palace maids, eunuchs, and guards were kneeling on both sides. It was obvious that this had been arranged in advance. It could be considered a standard marriage ceremony between members of the royal family. A moment later, Nie Tian and the others arrived outside the palace hall. In front of them were thousands of steps. Nie Tian looked at the stairs in front of him and frowned. He sensed that these steps were shrouded by the power of a formation. It was very strange. It's a gravitational array. At this moment, the fat cat's deep voice rang out. Gravity formation. Nie Tian heard Fat Cat's voice and his eyes narrowed. In the past, he had also come into contact with gravity arrays, so he was very familiar with the aura of the arrays. However, the gravity array in front of him felt very unfamiliar. Nie Tian, this gravity array is not easy to walk through. Be careful. Then, the fat cat spoke again. The energy of a boundary has been fused into the gravity array, which could increase the effect of the gravity array by dozens of times. I'm afraid that the effect of the gravity array would be infinitely greater at the top of the stairs. Even a Class 9 half-saint would find it very difficult to walk through. I understand. Nie Tian nodded quietly, his expression somber. He did not expect that the gravity array would actually be fused with the energy of a boundary. Then, Nie Tian transmitted his voice to the others to remind them to be careful. Of course, the gravity array was nothing to Jing Yue, Jing Rue, and the others, since they were all demi-saints. Then, as they stepped onto the stairs, they immediately felt their bodies sinking as if there was an invisible hand on the ground that was tightly hugging their legs. That was when Xiao Tang turned to look at Nie Tian and the others, smiling weirdly as he thought to himself, "Brat, let's see how you're going to cross this gravity array." The gravity array was specially prepared for Nie Tian and the other guardians. It was also because of this that Jing Rue had chosen the guardians with great strength. If the bodyguards of the Holy Moon Dynasty could not even walk through the steps of the Imperial Palace, the Holy Moon Dynasty would be utterly humiliated. "Brother Nie, are you all right?" Jing Rue's expression changed slightly as he stepped onto the gravity array, and he transmitted his voice to Nie Tian as he felt the ground beneath his feet sinking. "I'm fine." Nie Tian smiled and calmly replied. His strength was not great, but his martial body was very powerful, and it would not be a problem for him to cross the gravity array. Perhaps only Jushan Anjuha's martial body was slightly stronger than Nie Tian's among the guardians of the Holy Moon Dynasty, while the others' martial bodies were definitely inferior to Nie Tian's. The first 1,000 or so steps were relatively easy for them. Their pace was slow but steady. However, the further they went, the stronger the gravity array became. A few of them were already beginning to feel strained. There were a total of 7 people in the Guardians of the Holy Moon Dynasty: Nie Tian, Ji Qiwu, Lu Fengming, Jushan, Juha, Fang Yan, and Ji Chen. Nie Tian and the Shanhe brothers had strong martial bodies, so it was naturally no problem for them. Ji Qiwu and Lu Fengming were strong enough, so they could barely endure it. Fang Yan and Ji Chen were relatively weaker, and their foreheads were already covered in beads of sweat. It was as if thousands of tons of lead sand had been poured into their feet, and every step they took required great effort. "Humph." Xiao Tang turned around and glanced at Fang Yan and Ji Chen. He sneered in his heart and said, "You 2 pieces of trash. One is a rank 4 half-saint, and the other is a rank 2 half-saint. How can you cross the gravity array? When you reach the steps at the back, prepare to walk on your stomach." The dignified guardians of the Holy Moon Dynasty actually had to lie on the step. The Holy Moon Dynasty's face was completely lost. However, Xiao Tang was very surprised at this moment. Why was Nie Tian walking so easily? Nie Tian was the weakest. Shouldn't he be unable to stand up now? However, he didn't care. He was sure that Nie Tian wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. "Fang Yan, Ji Chen, can you still hold on?" Nie Tian heard Fang Yan and Ji Chen's light panting and secretly asked them. "We're fine." The 2 nodded. Clearly, they were holding on. If they fell at this moment, they wouldn't be losing face for themselves, but the Holy Moon Dynasty and Holy Soul Academy. Jushan Juha, I'll leave them to you. Remember, no matter what, you can't let them fall. Nye Tian's eyes darkened slightly, and he transmitted his voice to the Shanha brothers. The Shanha brothers responded and secretly released their auras to support Fang Yen and Ji Chen. The two of them had the strongest martial bodies, even stronger than Ji Qiuwu, who was a rank 9 half-saint. Therefore, it was the easiest for them to walk, and they could help Fang Yen and Ji Chen. Ji Qiuwu and Lu Fengming were very strong. So far they could still protect themselves. With the help of the Shanha brothers, Fang Yen and Ji Chen looked much better. After a while, the figures of Nye Tian and the others arrived at the last few hundred steps. However, at this moment, 7 figures appeared on the steps above. They wore the same clothes and looked at them with strange smiles on their faces. Chapter 28:20. Kill them, envoys. Upon hearing Jing Rui's words, Nye Tian's eyes narrowed and his expression changed. These people are the same as the envoys. They are all young cultivators under 1,000 years old. They must have been carefully selected, Jing Rui said in a low voice. Jing Rui solemnly transmitted his voice. Their goal is very simple. They want to humiliate you, the protectors. Nye Tian's eyes flickered and he immediately understood. The so-called envoys and envoys were actually young geniuses chosen by the two parties to the marriage. They represented the strength of both parties. To put it bluntly, it was actually a contest of strength between the Holy Moon Dynasty and the Xiantian Dynasty. After all, the two parties were getting married, and no one wanted to embarrass themselves. At this time, the 7 envoys walked down. They looked very relaxed, and there was no sign of strain on their faces. Nye Tian frowned, feeling strange. The 7 envoys were about the same strength as them. There was a stage 9 half-saint, a stage 8 half-saint, and the rest were around stage 5 half-saint. These people were standing at the highest point of the step. Even if they had maintained their strength, it should not be so easy. Just as Nye Tian was puzzled, Fat Cat's voice sounded again. Nye Tian, these people seem to have taken some kind of divine pill that can help them resist the suppression of the gravity barrier. Despicable. Nye Tian's face darkened and he cursed in his heart. Originally, the envoys were already at a disadvantage against the envoys. After all, Nye Tian and the others had walked all the way up from the lowest step, and their strength had been greatly exhausted. And these envoys had actually used divine pills to propose marriage. It was obvious that they wanted to kill Nye Tian and the others. Nye Tian, you can't resist these guys. Fat Cat frowned and said in a low voice. Then what should we do? Nye Tian was stunned, and his expression was extremely ugly. They had already come this far, and there was no other way. They had to resist even if they couldn't. At this moment, Lu Fengming could no longer hold on. Her face was slightly red, and her legs were trembling uncontrollably. Lu Fengming, hold on. Nye Tian frowned and secretly transmitted his voice. Lu Fengming nodded heavily and clenched her fists tightly. Although he didn't like Nye Tian and even hated Nye Tian a little, he was still a man with vigor. He knew the importance of this moment, so no matter what, he had to hold on. Nye Tian, I have an idea, but you'll have to bear even more pressure. Can you handle it? At that moment, the Fat Cat spoke again. Yes. Nye Tian didn't say another word and directly roared. All right. Fat Cat replied, and then secretly released a stream of glazed qi, quietly enveloping Nye Tian and the others. At this moment, Nye Tian suddenly felt the pressure on his body increase by several times. His body swayed for a moment before he steadied himself, while the others felt a lot more relaxed, and their complexions immediately improved. Nye Tian, I've opened a small formation, and you're the eye of the formation. As long as you hold on, none of the 7 of you will fall. The Fat Cat said to Nye Tian in a deep voice. Nye Tian nodded heavily. Although his expression was a little ugly, his eyes were very determined. Damn! You damn fat cat, you're so ruthless. Nye Tian only has the strength of God's state peak. How can he possibly bear such heavy pressure? At this moment, Liolio's voice suddenly sounded, and he actually started to complain about the fat cat. Dead Soulgrass, are you here to watch a joke? What's the use of having you around? The fat cat was not to be outdone, and cried out sharply. You motherf asterisk cur. Lulu was stunned for a moment, and actually cursed. The fat cat's formation actually shifted the pressure on the others, and directly put it on Nye Tian. The reason why he dared to take such a risk was because of the existence of Lulu. Previously, Nye Tian and Shanha competed in martial body, and with the help of Lulu, they defeated the Shanha brothers. At that time, Nye Tian was only half a step to the peak of the God state. Now that Nye Tian was already at the peak of the God state, if Lulu was willing to help, he would definitely be able to help Nye Tian resist the huge pressure. Your Royal Highness, please. At this time, the 7 envoys had already walked down, and they bowed to let Xiao Tang and Jing Yue pass. Jing Rui also walked over. Kill them, don't leave a single one alive. At this moment, Xiao Tang's voice suddenly sounded in Nye Tian's divine sense. It was obvious that Xiao Tang was giving orders to the 7 envoys, and he deliberately sent a voice transmission to Nye Tian, letting Nye Tian know. It had to be said that this person's methods were extremely sinister and vicious. These 7 envoys did not want to embarrass Nye Tian and the others, but to kill them. Come! The corners of Nye Tian's mouth twitched. He was not afraid at all. Brother Nye, be careful, don't fall. Jing Rui's figure walked away and said to Nye Tian. He still did not know that Xiao Tang wanted to kill Nye Tian and the others. Second Prince, don't worry. My bodyguards will not lose face. Nye Tian replied indifferently, extremely calm. At this time, the 7 envoys walked down, and the person in the lead directly released his aura, crushing down on Nye Tian and the others. This person was obviously the leader of the bodyguards. His strength was rank 9 half-sage, and his aura seemed to be stronger than Ji Cho Wu. Nye Tian walked at the forefront, bearing the brunt of the attack. However, he did not retreat, but took a step forward, fighting head-on with that person. Bang! The next moment, the 2 auras collided, and a muffled sound came from the void. Nye Tian took a step forward and climbed up a flight of stairs. However, the leader of the bridal escort group froze on the spot. Immediately, that person frowned, obviously very surprised. He did not expect that Nye Tian dared to fight head-on with him, and even blocked him directly. The people behind Nye Tian were also flabbergasted. They didn't understand what was going on. Ji Cho Wu and the others did not know that they were in a formation at this moment. Immediately afterwards, the leader of the bridal escort group let out a cold laugh and sent a voice transmission to Nye Tian, looking very arrogant. Not bad, kid. You're not bad, despicable enough. Nye Tianling replied with a smile, his eyes full of contempt. The other party took a divine pill and resisted the gravity enchantment, absolutely worthy of the word despicable. Courting death. The eyes of the leader of the bodyguards darkened, and with a low roar, he directly smashed down with his fist. In the gravity enchantment, it was very difficult for martial artists to use divine power. Even if they took a divine pill, it would be useless. Therefore, at this moment, what they wanted to compete was the true strength of the martial body. When the surrounding people saw this scene, they did not find it strange at all. In the confrontation between the bodyguards and the bodyguards, this kind of collision of martial bodies was very common, as long as it was not too excessive. The one who is courting death is you. Facing the fist in front of him, Nye Tian's eyes darkened slightly, but he did not dodge at all. Instead, he blasted out a fist, wanting to fight head-on with the other party. Even if the other party was a rank 9 half-sage, under this kind of collision of martial bodies, Nye Tian was not afraid in the slightest. Bang! In the next moment, the 2 fists directly collided, and like metal and stone, a muffled sound came. Nie Tian's figure stepped up another flight of stairs. Chapter 28-21. Useless idiot. Under the collision of their fists, the leader of the matchmaking group swayed and fell backward. Fortunately, there was someone behind him. Otherwise, he would have been lying on the ground. How is this possible? The leader of the bridal escort group steadied himself and his eyes widened in shock. He was a stage 9 half-sage, and the power of the Dan in his body could resist part of the gravity. However, under such circumstances, he couldn't even defeat an immortal state peak expert. Could this kid's martial body be that of a divine beast? Get out of the way! Nie Tianling sneered and roared in a low voice. With Liuyo's help, he had secretly activated the power of the Holy Soul Curse Seal, so his martial body had become much stronger. Liuyo's mastery of the Holy Soul Curse Seal was very exquisite. It could improve Nie Tian's martial body without losing control of the Curse Seal. However, the pressure Nie Tian was under was also unimaginable. Even a martial artist with an abnormal martial body like Zhu Shan and Zhu, he would be crushed to death under the same pressure, let alone an ordinary immortal state peak expert. Nie Tian didn't want to be entangled with the bridal escort group. He only needed to go to the highest step and reach Jingyue's side. Bastard! However, the bridal escort group leader didn't want to stop. He roared and punched again. Nie Tian's eyes darkened. He reached out and grabbed the bridal escort group leader's fist. You! The bridal escort group leader was stunned and almost screamed when his fist was blocked. You forced me to do this. Nie Tian's lips twitched and he smiled cold. Then, he suddenly exerted force in his hand. Crack, crack, crack. Suddenly, the sound of bones breaking could be heard in the air. The bridal escort group leader let out a scream. The strength in Nie Tian's hand was so strong that it was like an iron clamp. He crushed the bones in the hand of the bridal escort group leader. Leader! The other bridal escort group leader shouted at the same time. The spectators could not help but raise their heads. Their faces were filled with astonishment, unable to believe the scene before them. Who could have imagined that a 9th-rank half-saint would be completely crushed by a godly realm martial artist? Trash! Xiao Tang, who had already taken his seat, let out a low roar in his heart when he saw this scene. He actually grimaced in pain, wishing that he could tear Nie Tian apart alive. What are you guys still standing there for? Do it! The leader of the bridal escort group endured the pain and directly shed all pretense of cordiality as he shouted. Xiao Tang had just given him an order to kill Nie Tian and the others. If he couldn't do it with Xiao Tang's bloodthirsty personality, he definitely wouldn't let him live. The rest of the 6 envoys reacted abruptly and attacked simultaneously, directly smashing towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He had no choice but to let go of the bridal escort leader. Then, he punched out with both fists. Bang! Crack! Bang! Crack! 2 muffled sounds rang out, followed by the sound of bones cracking. 2 envoys were directly blasted flying out by Nie Tian. Their fists directly became a bloody mess. Bang! 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 And at the same time, Nie Tian's body also suffered 4 punches. His figure involuntarily swayed. He retreated 2 steps and was supported by Ji Chouwu behind him. After he stabilized his figure, a trace of blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth. Originally, he was already withstanding tremendous pressure. In addition to suffering 4 forceful punches, he immediately felt like his entire body was going to fall apart. He looked inside his body. He actually had 2 broken ribs. Boss, are you alright? Zhu Shan and Zhu He opened their mouths at the same time, wanting to make a move to help Nie Tian. I'm fine. You guys don't move. But Nie Tian waved his hand, indicating the Shan He brothers not to make a move. Right now, they were inside Fat Cat's array formation. They must ensure that the array formation was not messed up. Nie Tian was the eye of the array. As long as he could hold on, everything would be fine. Stinking brat, your ribs are already broken. Do you still want to hold on? The envoy growled. He no longer cared about etiquette. Like a ferocious beast, he directly rushed down. The bones in his hand were broken, but he still had the strength to fight. He did not believe that Nye Tian would not fall with his ribs broken. Puff! The envoy's fist smashed down. There was actually a sound of air breaking. Nye Tian's gaze darkened. He directly stretched out his hand and grabbed the other party's fist. Then, he took advantage of the momentum and threw him out. No. The envoy howled miserably and directly fell down. He rolled to the bottom of the stairs. Who knew how many bones in his body were broken? Idiot! Nye Tianling sneered, then raised his head to look at the other envoys and said, Do you guys still want to make a move? No. The few of them were so scared that their faces turned pale and their teeth chattered. They could not imagine what kind of existence Nye Tian was. His martial body was even stronger than that of a divine beast. Let's go. Nye Tianling sneered, no longer paying attention to those people, and walked up the stairs step by step. When they took the last step and arrived at the main hall, Xiao Tang's face was already extremely gloomy, almost bleeding. At this moment, he could not wait to personally make a move and directly tear Nye Tian to pieces. However, he still had some rationality. He only looked at Nye Tian with resentment in his eyes, not saying a word. Nye Tian came to the main hall and stood behind Jing Yue and Jing Rui. After standing still, Nye Tian said lightly, Your Royal Highness, Second Prince. Nye Tian was lucky. I did not fail the mission and did not embarrass the Holy Moon Dynasty. His words were clearly meant for Xiao Tang to hear. Brother Nye, you have worked hard, Jing Rui said lightly, unable to hide the joy on his face. Making Nye Tian the leader of the bodyguards was the wisest decision he had ever made in his life. Xiao Tang looked at Nye Tian, his face extremely gloomy. One could even hear him gnashing his teeth. Following that, the two sides exchanged a few words, then Jing Yue and the others left the main hall and went to the residence for the time being. They would only be able to meet the Xiantian Emperor a few days later. Once the Xiantian Emperor nodded and signed the marriage contract, Xiao Tang and Jing Yue could proceed with the wedding. A moment later, Nye Tian and the others arrived at the residence of the palace and went to their respective rooms. According to the rules, the bodyguards had completed all their tasks, so Nye Tian and the others could leave. However, just as Nye Tian returned to his room, the second prince Jing Rui came over. Brother Nye, are you all right? Jing Rui had a faint smile on his face as he asked with concern. I'm fine. Nye Tian smiled faintly. His injuries had already healed, but he could tell that Jing Rui had come to see him for a reason. Thus, he didn't beat around the bush and said directly, Your Highness, if you have something to say, just say it. Brother Nye, you really are a smart man. Jing Rui nodded with a smile, then his expression became much more solemn. After making sure there was no one around, he said, Brother Nye, do you know why royal sister married Prince Xiantian? Nye Tian was startled, then he shook his head. He had been wondering why Jing Yue would marry Prince Xiantian, knowing that he was a violent and bloodthirsty man. Judging from Jing Yue's attitude, no one had forced her to do so. Thus, there had to be more to it than met the eye. Brother Nye, royal sister and I came to the Xiantian dynasty for one thing. Jing Rui's expression was solemn as he spoke carefully. What is it? Nye Tian's eyes narrowed as he asked. Chapter 28-22. Flawless Meteorite. Upon hearing this name, Nye Tian's eyes narrowed and his expression froze. This was the third time he heard this name. The first time was from Ji Cho Wu, who told him that Hua Iru wanted him to get the meteorite at all costs. The second time was from Jing Rui, but Jing Rui only asked then and didn't say anything else. Now that Jing Rui mentioned the meteorite again, how could Nye Tian not be shocked? Yes, for the meteorite. Jing Rui nodded and said, Brother Nye, I won't hide it from you now. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. As expected, Jing Yue's marriage to Xiantian Crown Prince was not so simple. Brother Nye, with your intelligence, you should be able to tell that royal sister has her own difficulties in marrying Xiantian Crown Prince. Jing Rui continued, royal sister sacrificed herself for a chance. What chance? Nye Tian was startled and couldn't help but ask. A chance to enter the Xiantian mystery realm. Jing Rui nodded and said, royal sister has one condition for marrying into the Xiantian dynasty. The Xiantian dynasty must allow us to enter the Xiantian mystery realm once. What is the Xiantian mystery realm? Nye Tian asked with a frown. The Xiantian mystery realm is the ancestral land of the Xiantian dynasty. Jing Rui's expression was solemn as he said, legend has it that the profound heaven ancestor entered the profound heaven secret realm and obtained what was inside, allowing his strength to soar. In the end, he established the profound heaven dynasty and became an overlord. The Xiantian mystery realm can only be opened to the direct descendants of the Xiantian dynasty. No one else has the right to enter the mystery realm. The marriage between the two dynasties has a secret agreement that the Xiantian dynasty will allow us to enter the Xiantian mystery realm once. Nye Tian's eyes grew serious as he said, Your Highness, the heavenly meteor you're looking for is in the profound heaven's secret realm, right? Yes. Jing Rui nodded. Your Royal Highness, I would like to know, what exactly is the heavenly meteorite stone? Nye Tian became cold and asked with a frown. Rumor has it that the heavenly meteorite stone is a meteorite from the Archean sacred world. The meteorite contains a mysterious power that is said to be even more terrifying than the saint energy. As Jing Rui spoke, his expression became even more cautious. He carefully said, It is said that the profound heaven ancestor obtained the heavenly meteorite stone, which is why his strength rose so quickly. A long time ago, the mystic sky dynasty was called the Xian nation. It was just a small third-rate nation in the Saint Soul region. The reason why the profound sky dynasty is able to become one of the four great dynasties is all because of the profound sky patriarch alone. So that's how it is. Nye Tian was surprised, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. A piece of heavenly meteorite stone was able to turn a small third-rate nation into a great dynasty. It was obvious how powerful the meteorite was. Your Royal Highness, according to what you said, the heavenly meteorite stone should be the greatest secret of the mystic sky dynasty. How did you know that it is in the Xiantian mystery realm? Nye Tian was very calm and asked with a faint smile. Brother Nye, I know what you are worried about. Jing Rui nodded. Since I asked for your help, of course I will tell you everything. The heavenly meteorite stone is indeed a great secret. The reason why I know about it is from a teacher in your Saint Soul Academy. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed and his heart sank when he heard Jing Rui's words. Yes. Jing Rui thought that Nye Tian was just surprised and nodded with a smile. That teacher is a Pill Dao Grandmaster. As for his name, it is not convenient for me to reveal it. A teacher in the Saint Soul Academy, a Pill Dao Grandmaster. As Nye Tian thought about this information, he already had an answer. Huairu. The teacher that Jing Rui spoke of was most likely Huairu. This also proved that Ji Cho Wu was really Huairu's disciple. The heavenly meteorite stone was a secret of the Xiantian Empire. Ji Cho Wu was only an outer sect disciple of the Saint Soul Academy. There was no way he could know about it. He could only have heard it from Huairu. Connecting all the dots, Nye Tian couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He was amazed at Huairu's scheming. It was obvious that the heavenly meteorite stone was what Huairu wanted. However, he couldn't enter the Xiantian mystery realm. Thus, he borrowed Jing Yue and Jing Rui to bring Nye Tian into the mystery realm. Brother Nye, actually, I made you the leader of the Guardian Squad because I received guidance from that Grandmaster. Jing Rui laughed and said, I have to say, that Grandmaster really has a good eye. If you weren't the leader of the Guardian Squad, Royal Sister and I probably wouldn't even have made it to Xiantian City, let alone enter the Xiantian Mystery Realm. The corner of Nietian's mouth twitched. His expression was somewhat stiff. It seemed that everything had been arranged by Huairu. To put it bluntly, Jing Yue and Jing Rue were just two chess pieces of Huairu. Huairu had meticulously laid out this game of chess. His goal was obvious. It was to let Nietian get the heavenly meteorite stone. Nietian was very curious. What was this heavenly meteorite stone that Huairu cared so much about and planned so meticulously? Your Royal Highness, I would like to ask you one last question. After a moment, Nietian became cold. He looked at Jing Rue and asked, "Why do you and Her Royal Highness want the heavenly meteorite stone so urgently?" For the heavenly meteorite stone, Jing Yue didn't hesitate to sacrifice herself and marry a homicidal maniac. This price was not small. She must have a reason for doing so. If it was purely for power, Jing Yue wouldn't be so ruthless. If it was to attack the Xiantian dynasty, it didn't make sense. After all, the Xiantian dynasty's foundation was already stable. Even if they lost the heavenly meteorite stone, it wouldn't collapse. So what was Jing Yue sacrificing herself for? To save someone. Jing Rue paused. After a long silence, he finally said, "Save someone." Nietian's eyes flickered as he asked, "Who are you saving?" He couldn't think of anyone who was so important to Jing Yue that she would sacrifice herself. "Our mother." Jing Rue's eyes darkened. Even his voice was trembling. "This." Nietian was stunned. He was so shocked that he couldn't speak. He wasn't familiar with Jing Yue and Jing Rue, but he knew that their mother was already dead. But now, Jing Yue and Jing Rue wanted the heavenly meteorite stone to save their mother. What on earth was going on? Of course, Jing Rue knew what was on Nietian's mind. After taking a deep breath, he said, "Brother Nie, our mother isn't dead. She's been inflicted with a powerful curse, and has fallen into an eternal slumber. Only the heavenly meteorite stone's power can break the curse and awaken our mother." "How did you?" Nietian was stunned. He was just about to open his mouth when he stopped. He wanted to ask Jing Rue how he knew that the heavenly meteorite stone could break the curse, but he immediately thought of the answer. Huairu must have told them. Huairu. Everything was going according to his plan. Jing Yue and her brother would do anything to get the heavenly meteorite stone to save their mother. But the tragedy was that the heavenly meteorite stone they obtained would undoubtedly fall into Huairu's hands. Chapter 28-23. Empress Xuantian understood everything. His eyes trembled slightly and he sucked in a breath of cold air. Huairu's meticulous planning amazed and terrified him. Fortunately, Huairu was on his side. If he was his enemy, he was afraid that he wouldn't even know how he died in Saint Soul Academy. On the surface, Jing Yue and Jing Rue looked very opinionated and shrewd, but in the end, they were nothing more than two chess pieces for Huairu. Thinking of this, Nietian even sympathized with Yue and her brother. "Brother Nie, are you all right?" Jing Rue frowned when he saw the change in Nietian's expression. "I'm fine." Nietian smiled faintly and shook his head. Although Jing Yue and her brother were being used, if the meteorite stone could really save their mother, it would be worth it. "Your Highness, you wish to enter the mysterious Heaven Mystery Realm with us to search for the heavenly meteorite stones, right?" Nietian asked with a smile. "Yes." Jing Rue firmly nodded and his expression instantly turned solemn. "Brother Nie, that lord said that only you can take away the heavenly meteorite stone. Therefore, I need your help with this matter. I know that your mission is to protect the emissary. Everything you've done before has long exceeded the scope of responsibility of a protector. I'm very grateful. The next trip to the profound Heaven Mystery Realm is extremely dangerous. I might even lose my life." My royal sister and I don't have the authority to ask you to take this risk with us, but this matter concerns Mother's life. I sincerely ask Brother Nye to help us once. As he spoke, Jing Rue suddenly took a step back. His knees sank as he knelt in front of Nye Tian. Your Royal Highness, what are you doing? Nye Tian was taken aback and hurried forward to help Jing Rue up. However, Jing Rue refused to get up. With a solemn expression, he said, Brother Nye, if you don't agree to help, I will kneel and not get up. Nye Tian was stunned and almost laughed in his heart. Actually, even if Jing Rue did nothing, he would still follow him into the mysterious heaven mystic realm. Since Hua Iru told Ji Cho Wu to bring back the heavenly meteorite stone, this undoubtedly showed the importance of the heavenly meteorite stone. Therefore, even if Jing Rue didn't allow Nye Tian to go, Nye Tian still wanted to go. Now that Jing Rue was kneeling and begging, Nye Tian didn't know whether to laugh or cry in his heart. Your Highness, I promise you. Nye Tian faintly smiled, nodded and said, Get up. Brother Nye, do you really agree? Jing Rue raised his head to look at Nye Tian, his eyes trembling with excitement. He was so surprised that he was about to burst into tears. Of course, he did not know what Nye Tian was thinking. Instead, he felt that it was a great favor for Nye Tian to agree to his request. Nye Tian nodded again, his eyes filled with determination. Jing Rue stood up and solemnly said, Brother Nye, Jing Rue will never forget your great kindness. If one day Jing Rue can control the Holy Moon Dynasty, I am willing to give half of the imperial power to Brother Nye. Nye Tian could not help but be stunned when he heard Jing Rue's words. This gratitude did not seem fake, and it touched Nye Tian's heart. After a while, Jing Rue calmed down and said seriously, Brother Nye, in 3 days, we will meet Her Majesty the Xiantian Empress and prepare to enter the mysterious heaven mystic realm. Okay. Nye Tian nodded, then thought of something and asked, Your Highness, what about the other bodyguards? If they want to return to the Holy Soul Academy, they can go directly. If they want to follow us into the mysterious heaven mystic realm, that's fine too, Jing Rue said with a faint smile. Got it. I'll discuss it with them, Nye Tian said with a faint smile and a nod. Jing Rue did not stay any longer and directly left. 3 days later, Nye Tian asked the others to wait in the residence while he followed Jing Yue and her brother to meet Empress Xiantian. After a while, Jing Yue and the others arrived at the mysterious Heaven Golden Palace. At this moment, a graceful middle-aged woman reclined on a spacious golden phoenix chair. Her eyes were half closed, and she looked very languid. However, the aura around her was very powerful. If one were to carefully sense it, it would be like a vast ocean. This woman's appearance could not be considered to be devastatingly beautiful, but her entire temperament was noble and cold, giving off a dignified and inviolable feeling. She was the ruler of the Xiantian Empire, Empress Xiantian. Since the founding of the Xiantian Empire, there had been a total of 17 rulers, and Empress Xiantian was the only female ruler. Rumor had it that in order to fight for the throne, Empress Xiantian had personally killed her 3 older brothers and 7 younger brothers. In the end, her hands were stained with blood as she took the throne. Nye Tian looked at Empress Xiantian, who was sitting on the phoenix chair, and felt an extremely heavy hostility from her, making one's heart tremble. The eldest princess of the Holy Moon Empire, Jing Yue, greets Her Majesty the Xiantian Empress. Jing Yue bowed slightly and said loudly, Yue, we're a family from now on. There's no need to be so polite. Sit. Empress Xiantian waved her hand. Her voice was very cold, without the slightest hint of a woman's gentleness. However, there was a special attraction to it, and it did not sound harsh. Thank you, Your Majesty. Jing Yue nodded slightly and carefully sat to the side. Jing Rue followed closely behind Jing Yue and sat below her. Due to the difference in status, Nye Tian could only stand behind the two of them. On the other side, Xuantian's crown prince, Xiao Tang, sat up straight and glared at Nye Tian. His eyes were filled with hatred, and he did not hide his murderous intent at all. Nie Tian, however, was very calm, completely ignoring Xiao Tang. Following that, Empress Xiantian said some polite words, then locked her gaze on Nie Tian. She did not speak, only looking at Nie Tian cold. Nie Tian, don't look at that woman. Nie Tian felt very uncomfortable being stared at by Empress Xiantian. Just as he was about to raise his head to look at her, Fat Cat's anxious voice suddenly rang out. Nie Tian's expression froze, then he lowered his head. You're Nie Tian, right? At that moment, Empress Xiantian finally spoke. Even though she was smiling, her voice was cold and harsh. Mother Empress, he's Nie Tian. Before Nie Tian could speak, Xiao Tang spoke in a sinister tone. Empress Xuantian's gaze shifted and she glared at Xiao Tang. The latter's expression froze in fear, and beads of sweat began to form on his forehead. Nie Tian's gaze froze when he saw Xiao Tang's reaction. He felt very strange. He did not expect someone like Xiao Tang to be so afraid of Empress Xiantian. Just one look was enough to scare Xiao Tang out of his wit. Nie Tian, raise your head. At that moment, Empress Xuantian's voice rang out again, this time with a hint of domineering coldness. Nie Tian's heart sank. He thought for a moment, then slowly raised his head. When he looked at Empress Xiantian, their eyes met. Immediately, he felt his consciousness tremble, and his spiritual soul was instantly lost. In an instant, Nie Tian felt everything around him change. It was as if he had fallen into a bottomless abyss, and the more he struggled, the deeper he sank. Chapter 28-24. Chapter 28-19. Illusory night. Blood eyes up in the golden hall. Nie Tian suddenly lost control of his consciousness. His expression became dull and his body was drenched in cold sweat. However, he regained control of his consciousness in the next moment, but his face was as white as a sheet. Brother Nie, what's wrong? Jing Rui could not help but ask when he saw Nie Tian in such a sorry state. Nie Tian let out a long sigh to indicate that he was fine. His consciousness had only gone out of control for a moment, but to him, it felt like a long night had passed. The energy in his body had been completely consumed. He finally understood why Fat Cat had not allowed him to look into Empress Xuantian's eyes. This woman's eyes were strange. Rumor has it that your majesty possesses the illusory night blood eyes. Today, I see that it is indeed true. Jing Yue spoke up. Her pretty face was a little angry as she said, It's just that your majesty has used such a terrifying illusory eye technique on a peak godly state martialist. I don't think it's appropriate. Jing Yue, how dare you? What right do you have to comment on how my empress does things? Xiao Tang yelled before Empress Xiantian could speak. Empress Xiantian smiled and waved a hand to stop Xiao Tang. She then looked at Jing Yue and said, Your Highness is right. I have indeed been a little rude. As she spoke, she turned her gaze back to Nie Tian and said, It's just that there's a strange aura on Nie Tian's body that reminds me of an old friend. So, I couldn't help but test him. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and his expression darkened. With his current strength, he was nothing compared to Empress Xiantian. She could easily kill him with a snap of her fingers. However, he was curious as to who he had reminded Empress Xiantian of. Nie Tian, if I'm not mistaken, you're related to Nie Fenghua, aren't you? Empress Xiantian asked in a deep voice. I'm Nie Fenghua's son, Nie Tian replied cold and gloomy. No wonder. Empress Xiantian chuckled and said, The power of my eye just now is enough to destroy the divine sense of a ninth-stage half-saint in an instant, but your divine sense is very strong. You managed to remain unscathed under the attack of my eye power. So you are Nie Fenghua's son. Like father, like son. Nie Tian frowned and asked solemnly, Your Majesty knows my father? Of course I do. Empress Xiantian smiled strangely and said, I've fought with your father before, so I'm not afraid of him. Out of all the opponents this emperor has encountered, Your father is the only one who has ever broken this Emperor's illusion night eye technique. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard Empress Xuantian's words. He did not say anything else. He sensed a hint of resentment in Empress Xuantian's eyes when she mentioned Nie Fenghua. It seemed that there was a grudge between Nie Fenghua and Empress Xiantian. Your Majesty, can we fulfill the agreement now? At this time, Jing Yue seemed to be a little impatient and said in a deep voice. The agreement she was referring to was, of course, the matter of entering the mysterious heaven secret realm. Of course. Empress Xiantian smiled and looked at Jing Yue with a flicker in her eyes. At this moment, her eyes turned crimson like fresh blood. However, it only lasted for a moment before her eyes returned to normal. Not good. At that moment, little Fat Cat seemed to have discovered something and cried out in shock. Fat, what did you discover? Nie Tian was startled and could not help but ask. I'll tell you later, Fat Cat replied and then went silent. At this time, Empress Xiantian looked at Nie Tian again as if she had discovered something. However, she did not say anything because she was not too sure. Following that, Jing Yue and the others left the mysterious Heaven Golden Palace and quickly returned to the residence. Fat, what happened just now? Nie Tian asked impatiently as soon as he returned to his room. Nie Tian, do you know what the blood eye of the night illusion is? Fat Cat did not answer his question and instead asked him a question. I don't know. Nie Tian shook his head with a very gloomy expression. He had never heard of the blood eye of the night illusion, but he had just experienced how terrifying it was. It was only a glance, but under the attack of the fantasy night blood eye, his god's soul was lost, and his soul consciousness fell into the abyss. Empress Xiantian was obviously just testing him. If she really wanted to kill him, he would have been dead long ago. The third other eye. Fat Cat paused and said in a deep voice. The third other eye. Nie Tian frowned and his expression changed when he heard Fat Cat's words. Up until now, he had seen many congenital other eyes, but he did not know about the first 3 of the 10 congenital other eyes. He never thought that Empress Xuantian's blood eye of the night illusion was the legendary third other eye. No wonder the blood eye of the night illusion was so terrifying. Rumor has it that the blood eye of the night illusion is the most powerful illusory eye technique. Fat Cat calmed down and said, but as far as I know, the blood eye of the night illusion is far more than just casting illusory spells. But I don't know what the blood eye of the night illusion is capable of. Nie Tian took a deep breath and calmed himself down. His eyes suddenly trembled and he asked, Fat, when Empress Xiantian looked at Jing Yue in the Golden Hall, her eyes instantly turned blood-red. Did she do something to Jing Yue? Yes. Fat Cat nodded and said, I'm guessing that woman must have used an illusory spell on the Jing girl. But I don't know what the illusory spell is or when it will take effect. This. Nie Tian frowned and his expression stiffened. Next, he would enter the Xiantian Mystery Land with Jing Yue to look for the heavenly meteorite stone. But Empress Xiantian had cast an illusory spell on Jing Yue. This was very troublesome. The blood eye of the night illusion was very strange. Who knew what Empress Xiantian had done to Jing Yue? Nie Tian, don't let the Jing girl know about this. She has no defense against illusory spells. Even if she knew, she would only be more nervous. At this time, Fat Cat said, when we enter the Xiantian Mystery Land, I will find a chance to sense the illusory spell and see if there is a way to break it. Yes. Nie Tian nodded. Now that things had come to this, they could only do so. After a while, Nie Tian and the others were ready. Under the guidance of the palace guards, they arrived at a secret place in the palace. Xiao Tang and the others were already waiting there. This time, Xiao Tang would also enter the Xiantian Mystery Land with them. Moreover, he would follow Jing Yue and the others closely, obviously to prevent them from doing anything. Besides Xiao Tang, there were a few familiar faces. They were the envoys who had received the bride that day. Nie Tian was very curious as to why Xiao Tang did not bring a few experts with him. Instead, he brought these young martial artists. Perhaps there was some kind of restriction in the Xiantian mystery land. Xiao Tang glanced at Nie Tian and the others and smiled cold. Finally, he looked at Jing Yue and asked, "Yue, are you ready?" Jing Yue's reaction was indifferent. She only nodded. The corner of Xiao Tang's mouth twitched. Then, he took out a black compass and turned it. Chapter 28-25. Space Fragment. Nie Tian frowned as he stared at the underground tunnel in front of him, his heart filled with shock. So the Xiantian secret territory was sealed beneath the Xiantian Imperial Palace. This really was hard to find. There was definitely a barrier set up around the area. The compass Xiao Tang had used earlier was used to activate the barrier. "Everyone, please." Xiao Tang smiled coldly as he glanced at Nie Tian's group, his eyes cold and sharp. Nie Tian's group strode forward and entered the tunnel. Next, Xiao Tang led his subordinates into the tunnel as well. Rumble. After everyone entered the tunnel, the crack in the ground actually closed up and returned to its original state. The group walked through the tunnel for several thousand meters before they finally saw the exit. When the crowd arrived at the exit, 4 black-robed elders appeared. These 4 elders had deep and powerful auras. They were clearly top-tier experts. Xiao Tang took out a medallion and showed it to them before they let them through. Clearly, these 4 elders were the guardians of the Xiantian secret territory. They forbade others from entering. Nie Tian's group walked out of the tunnel and finally arrived at the real secret territory. As soon as they stepped into the territory, Nie Tian could sense that the divine power here was far denser than in the outside world. Even Saint Soul Academy's Saint Soul Valley was not as dense as the Xiantian secret territory. Training in the Xiantian secret territory was definitely dozens of times more effective than training in the outside world. Jing Yue, I don't care what your goal is in entering the Xiantian secret territory. I just want to warn you that you better stay by my side obediently. Otherwise, you will die a horrible death. Xiao Tang looked cold at Jing Yue and threatened her. Is that so? Jing Yue laughed coldly, her face full of disdain. To be honest, she didn't think much of Prince Xiantian. Prince Xiantian was a ruthless and bloodthirsty man, but he wasn't very strong. Compared to Jing Yue, he was still a bit weaker. Jing Yue, are you looking down on me? Xiao Tang's face darkened, his eyes cold. Is there a problem with looking down on the weak? Jing Yue's beautiful eyes flickered as she said coldly. Jing Yue, you. Xiao Tang's face darkened. He suddenly felt a tightness in his chest and was unable to speak. He hadn't expected that Jing Yue would turn hostile faster than him. Let's go, Jing Yue said indifferently, ignoring Xiao Tang. Jing Rue and the others followed closely behind Jing Yue and headed toward a dense forest. Xiao Tang's expression was very ugly, so gloomy that it looked as if blood would drip from it. Your Highness, what should we do? A person behind Xiao Tang stepped forward and asked cautiously. Follow them. Xiao Tang shouted in a low voice. His lips curled into a cold arc as he said in his heart, Jing Yue, this crown prince will let you be arrogant for a while. Let's see if you can still be so arrogant after the Queen Mother's illusion takes effect. At that time, you can just obediently be this prince's little sheep. Nie Tian and the others followed behind Jing Yue unhurriedly. Boss, this is really a good place to cultivate. Zhu Shan walked to Nie Tian's side and couldn't help but say. Nie Tian nodded but didn't say anything. None of the bodyguards returned. They all followed Nie Tian to the mysterious heaven mystic realm. After experiencing the previous incident, Nie Tian's weight in everyone's heart was already very important. Even Lu Fengming, who had always been unhappy with Nie Tian, was now respectful to Nie Tian. However, Nie Tian's expression was not good at the moment. He was still worried about the illusion in Jing Yue's body. Nie Tian, this noble one is coming out now. Tell the Jing girl to carry this noble one. Fat Cat's voice sounded at this moment. Nie Tian was stunned. His face was full of black lines. He didn't know how to tell Jing Yue. Hurry up. Seeing that Nie Tian was still in a daze, the little fat cat urged. All right. Nie Tian agreed and walked to Jing Yue's side. He hesitated for a moment and said, Princess Royal, I have a spiritual pet that likes to approach girls. Can you help me carry it? Jing Yue couldn't help but be stunned when she heard Nie Tian's words. She seemed to suspect that she had heard wrongly. Idiot, can't you speak properly? Is this noble one a spiritual pet? Fat Cat was so angry that it made a strange sound. Then, it came out and jumped onto Jing Yue's shoulder. Jing Yue was shocked. Her beautiful eyes trembled. She looked at Fat Cat in surprise and said, This is your spiritual pet? Yes. Nie Tian nodded awkwardly. It's quite cute. Jing Yue was also a little embarrassed and nodded. She didn't understand why Nie Tian would suddenly take out a spiritual pet. Boy, Jing Yue will be my woman soon. You're just a piece of trash at the divine state, and you want to get your hands on it? Xiao Tang looked at Nie Tian coldly and said in an extremely arrogant manner. He felt that Nie Tian suddenly took out a spiritual pet to express his goodwill to Jing Yue. Jing Yue also reacted at this time, and her pretty face blushed. When Xiao Tang saw this scene, his eyes became even more vicious. He said fiercely in his heart, Jing Yue, don't think too much. I will soon get rid of you. Nie Tian looked a little embarrassed. He let Fat Cat approach Jing Yue just to better perceive the illusion in the latter's body. After Jing Yue's face returned to normal, she actually held the Fat Cat in her arms and stroked the Fat Cat from time to time. Obviously, she regarded it as a real spiritual pet. Fat Cat didn't show anything. Instead, he took the opportunity to carefully perceive the ocular power in Jing Yue's body. After a while, everyone came out of the dense forest. In front of them was a thorny forest. The forest faintly released a strange aura, as if it was shrouded by a mysterious power. Huh! At this time, Nie Tian felt something and his expression changed. He was shocked. Boss, are you okay? Zhu Shan saw Nie Tian's expression change and couldn't help but step forward to ask. Nie Tian smiled faintly and shook his head to indicate that he was fine. At this moment, he felt a strange aura from the dense forest. It seemed that the dense forest had a strange power that could stimulate the power of the stars in his body. Nie Tian felt that in the star origin stone, the realm zone formation's roar suddenly intensified and the power of the stars became active. Star resonance. At this time, the Ghost Emperor's voice suddenly sounded. He was very shocked. Huh! When Nie Tian heard the Ghost Emperor's voice, he couldn't help but be stunned. He didn't know what the Ghost Emperor was talking about. This really is a fragment of the starry sky holy world, the Ghost Emperor said again in the next moment. He was even more surprised, and the face of the light figure stiffened. Nie Tian's eyes froze and his whole body suddenly froze. He already knew that the Star Origin Stone was the main cornerstone of the Starry Holy Realm, and that the Starry Holy Realm had collapsed a long time ago. Chapter 28-26. An illusion attacked the mysterious Heaven Secret Realm, was a fragment of the Starry Sky Sacred Realm. Nie Tian's heart sank and he froze where he was. Lord Ghost Emperor, are you sure that this is a fragment of the Starry Sky Sacred Realm? Nie Tian asked in a low voice after a dozen seconds had passed. Very sure. The Ghost Emperor nodded and said, Do you think that the power of the stars in your body would become active for no reason? Well. Nie Tian was stunned and speechless for a moment. At this moment, he could clearly feel that the power of the stars in his body was slowly becoming active. It was as if the power of the stars was really resonating with the mysterious aura in the dense forest. Jing Yue, there are many places in the mysterious Heaven's Secret Realm with powerful barriers. This dense forest is shrouded by a mysterious force. Let's take a detour, Xiao Tang suddenly said in a low voice. Detour? Jing Yue turned around and glanced at Xiao Tang. She laughed and asked, "Why should we?" As she spoke, she took a step forward and was about to enter the dense forest. "Jing Yue, what are you doing?" Xiao Tang cried out in shock when he saw that. "I just don't want to be followed by a troublesome tail." Jing Yue smiled and flew into the dense forest. Nie Tian and the others were stunned for a moment before they reacted and rushed into the dense forest. "Damn it!" Xiao Tang saw that Nie Tian and the others had all rushed into the dense forest. His eyes trembled and he growled like a ferocious beast. "Your Highness!" The few people behind him all looked at him and said in unison, "Go after them!" Xiao Tang's eyes darkened. He knew what was going to happen next, so he had to follow Jing Yue. With that, Xiao Tang's figure immediately moved and rushed into the dense forest. However, the moment he rushed into the dense forest, he felt the terrifying power of the barrier pressing down on him, making him feel breathless. The dense forest seemed to be shrouded by a great barrier, and the pressure was very strong. Xiao Tang had the ability of a rank 8 demi-saint, but he felt that he had been suppressed by a level at the moment, as if he only had the ability of a rank 8 demi-saint. At that moment Jing Yue stopped and said coldly, "You guys go first. I'll stop them." The other figures shuttled back and forth, leaving Jing Yue alone to block the way. Nie Tian knew that Jing Yue was powerful, so he didn't plan to make a move and followed the others. "Xiao Tang, I don't want to kill you. If you know what's good for you, you'd better scram." Jing Yue's beautiful eyes flickered with Xiao Tang. "Jing Yue, you're so arrogant." Xiao Tang sneered, but he was not afraid at all. His figure rushed straight over. He did not believe that Jing Yue really dared to kill him. Courting death. Jing Yue's beautiful eyes darkened, and she immediately struck out with her palm. Suddenly, a violent palm force was released, blasting towards Xiao Tang and the others. "Damn it!" Xiao Tang growled. His body moved to the side, but he was still a step too slow. Bang! With a muffled sound, his figure flew backward, retreating hundreds of meters before he could stabilize himself. When the others saw that Xiao Tang had been slapped away, their expressions changed and they dared not move forward. Jing Yue was also suppressed in the dense forest, but her strength was originally above Xiao Tang's, so it was very easy for her to slap Xiao Tang away. "You overestimate yourself!" Jing Yue sneered, and then her figure moved, preparing to leave. However, at that moment she seemed to feel something. Her face suddenly changed and turned red. "What's going on?" Jing Yue's beautiful eyes narrowed, and she was shocked. She suddenly felt that there was a strange force appearing in her body, making her body inexplicably hot. "Haha, the illusion is working!" Xiao Tang saw that Jing Yue's expression had changed, and he shouted in surprise, "Jing Yue, you're mine." Immediately, his figure moved and he directly rushed over. He stretched out his big hand, and a wave of power rolled out, directly grabbing Jing Yue. Jing Yue's eyes trembled, and she wanted to move, but she found that all the power in her body was imprisoned, and she had no strength at all. "Hee, Jing Yue, aren't you very strong? Do you still have the strength to resist after being hit by the Queen's illusion night eye technique?" Xiao Tang laughed wildly, and his figure was less than 10 meters away from Jing Yue. "Get lost!" However, at that moment, an angry roar sounded, and then a figure appeared. At the same time, the shadow of a sword fell from the sky, pressing down on Xiao Tang. "Brat, you want to fight with me? You're courting death." When Xiao Tang saw that the person who came was Nie Tian, his eyes were extremely cold. With a strange cry, he slapped out a palm, and a palm shadow whistled out. Boom! Bang! However, the next moment, the palm and the sword collided, and the palm shadow directly collapsed. Then, the sword shadow fell, and Xiao Tang's figure directly flew out, and he was still in the air, vomiting blood. "Your Royal Highness, are you okay?" Nie Tian's figure came to Jing Yue, and his expression could not help but change. He felt that there was a strange force in Jing Yue's body, and her body was boiling hot, as if her whole body was a ball of flame. Nye Tian, I'm so hot." Jing Yue's pretty face was red, and her voice was trembling. "Hot?" Nye Tian's eyes darkened, and his expression was very ugly. He vaguely guessed that the illusion in Jing Yue's body should be activated. "Nye Tian, quickly take her away from here." Fat Cat suddenly looked at Nye Tian and shouted, and then his figure moved, and he returned to the origin embryo space. "Fat, what happened?" Nye Tian was stunned, and he faintly had a bad feeling in his heart. "Don't ask so many questions, leave immediately." Fat Cat was very nervous, and he hurriedly shouted, "Okay." Nye Tian nodded, and his figure moved, and he was ready to leave. However, at that moment, Xiao Tang's figure rushed over again, and the other people around him also attacked. "Get out of my way!" Nye Tian was worried that something would happen to Jing Yue, and with a roar, his whole body's sword momentum suddenly erupted, and with the starry heavenly slash in his hand, he slashed out wildly. Boom! Bang bang bang! Where the sword shadow landed, the void trembled, and then Xiao Tang and the others were actually sent flying by his sword, and they were sent flying in the air. Nye Tian frowned, and his face was full of surprise. He did not expect the power of this sword to be so strong. In this dense forest, the strength of other martial artists was greatly suppressed. Not only was Nye Tian not suppressed, but the power of the stars in his body resonated, and his strength was greatly enhanced. Therefore, under his sword, even Xiao Tang could not withstand it. How is this possible? Xiao Tang shouted in horror, and there was a bloody wound on his chest, and his injury was very serious. He dared not believe that Nye Tian could actually hurt him so seriously. Nye Tian did not care about him at all, and his figure moved, and he directly left. "Nye Tian, I feel so hot." Jing Yue lay on Nye Tian's body, and her divine sense was blurred, and her voice was muffled, and her body heat up even more. "Fat, what is going on? What kind of illusion is Her Highness under?" Nye Tian's figure moved back and forth, and he hurriedly asked. Yes, it's that kind of illusion." Fat Cat stuttered for a long time and finally said, "That kind of illusion?" Nye Tian was stunned, and for a moment, he did not understand. Chapter 28-27. When Nye Tian heard little Fat Cat's cry, he couldn't help but tremble and his expression stiffened. At this moment, he naturally understood what Fat Cat was saying. He had never imagined that Jing Yue's illusions would be so evil and perverted. Empress Xiantian was the ruler of a dynasty and a peak expert in the sacred heaven domain. How could she be so despicable as to cast such an obscene illusion on Jing Yue? However, in the next moment, Nye Tian came to a realization. No wonder Xiao Tang was always by Jing Yue's side. It turned out that he had already planned to make his move when Jing Yue's illusion took effect. Under normal circumstances, no one who entered the mysterious heaven mystery realm, except for Jing Yue, was a match for Xiao Tang. Empress Xiantian had cast an evil illusion on Jing Yue in advance. When the illusion took effect, Jing Yue would definitely not be a match for Xiao Tang. As for the others, Xiao Tang could kill them all. When that time came, Xiao Tang could easily possess Jing Yue, and could even openly say that he was saving Jing Yue. In fact, Xiao Tang was already Jing Yue's fiancé. He only needed to wait for some time and complete the wedding. Then, he could have Jing Yue rightfully. Perhaps Xiao Tang couldn't wait any longer, or perhaps he was afraid that Jing Yue would go back on her words. That was why he used such a despicable method. What a vicious pair of mother and son! When Nye Tian thought about this, his eyes darkened and a sharp chill appeared in his eyes. Nye Tian, don't think too much. Find a hidden place first. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice was heard. Hot, so hot, I feel so hot. At this moment, Jing Yue's consciousness was already blurred. She mumbled and began to tear her clothes with both hands, revealing a large patch of white skin on her chest. Nie Tian frowned and blushed. He immediately stopped Jing Yue and sped up. Brother Nie, what's going on? Jing Rue turned around and saw the strange scene. His face turned cold and he asked in a deep voice, "Let's leave this forest first. I'll explain to you later." Nie Tian nodded his head as a pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back. His silhouette transformed into a streak of light as he shot forwards. The others didn't know what was going on, and they all had strange expressions on their faces as they followed. After a short moment, Nie Tian exited the dense forest and flashed towards a gorge. After entering the valley, he saw a cave. He moved and put Jing Yue in the cave. Then, he left Fat Cat behind and walked out. Brother Nie, what happened to my royal sister? What happened? Jing Rue came to the valley, stepped forward, and asked coldly. When he saw Jing Yue's appearance just now, he was confused. At this moment, he even suspected that Nie Tian had done something to her. Her Royal Highness has fallen into Empress Xuantian's illusion, Nie Tian said solemnly and briefly explained the situation. Bastard! Shameless! Bastard! After hearing Nie Tian's words, Jing Rue was completely enraged. He roared violently, wanting nothing more than to tear Empress Xuantian into pieces. He would never have thought that someone of her status would use such a despicable method. Calm down, Nie Tian said coldly, his face dark. At this moment, he had to remain calm. The more anxious he was, the worse it would be. Now, he could only hope that Fat Cat had a way to suppress and break the evil illusion that Jing Yue had fallen into. Nie Tian. At this time, Fat Cat came out of the cave, but his face was extremely ugly. Fat, how is Her Royal Highness? Nie Tian asked anxiously when he saw Fat Cat. The illusion night eye has already spread through Jing Yue's meridians. I can't suppress it anymore, Fat Cat said helplessly. Can't suppress it. Jing Rue's eyes trembled and his face turned pale. What should we do? Both of you, come in. Fat Cat glanced at Nie Tian and Jing Rue, then moved and entered the cave. Nie Tian and Jing Rue looked at each other and stepped into the cave. Although the cave was simple, it was full of spring. Jing Yue's clothes were torn, revealing a large area of her fair skin. She was also doing something indecent. Royal sister. Jing Rue saw this scene and immediately turned his head, clenching his fists tightly, his face dark and gloomy. Nie Tian looked at Jing Yue and could still maintain his composure. He sensed the latter's aura and found that there was a burning power rushing wildly in her body, as if it wanted to burn her whole body. Jing Yue's situation was very bad. If she did not immediately break the illusion, she would be tortured to death by the burning power in her body. Fat this. Nie Tian looked at Fat Cat, his face cold and gloomy. The dignified Empress Xuantian was so despicable and despicable. Fat Cat's eyes trembled slightly, but she did not speak. Nie Tian, save me. At this moment, Jing Yue seemed to have temporarily regained some consciousness and shouted. She already knew what was happening to her body and was willing to let Nie Tian save her. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard Jing Yue's words. His heart sank inexplicably and his expression kept changing. Saving Jing Yue meant that he had to be with her. However, Nie Tian and Jing Yue had only known each other for a very short time and there were no feelings between them. It was undeniable that Jing Yue was very beautiful. Even compared to Cher and Emo Rushi, she was not inferior. There were even times when Jing Yue exuded an aura that was breathtakingly beautiful. However, Nie Tian had never thought that something would happen between him and Jing Yue. More importantly, he did not want to possess Jing Yue under such circumstances. At this moment, if he remained indifferent, Jing Yue would undoubtedly die. Brother Nie, please save Imperial Sister. At this moment, Jing Rue suddenly sank to his knees and directly knelt in front of Nie Tian. Your Highness, what are you doing? Nie Tian was taken aback and stepped forward to help Jing Rue up. Brother Nye, please don't hesitate. I'll take responsibility for everything. Jing Rue did not get up. He looked up at Nye Tian and said solemnly. A younger brother was kneeling and begging another man to possess his sister. Such a scene was heartbreaking and ridiculous. However, Jing Rue had no other choice. Compared to others, Nye Tian was the best choice. Nye Tian frowned and his expression was very ugly. To be honest, Jing Yue's appearance and aptitude were enough to match any man. However, under the current circumstances, it was difficult for Nye Tian to do such a thing. Nye Tian, there's no time to hesitate. The Jing girl can't hold on any longer. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice rang out. Nye Tian glanced at Jing Yue and felt that the burning power in her body was even more violent. It was like a flaming beast that could devour her at any time. Brother Nye. Jing Rue spoke again with a cold and ugly expression. You can leave. Nye Tian's eyes darkened and he finally spoke, his eyes surging with determination. Chapter 28:28. Chapter 28:23. Chapter 283. My woman. Only Nye Tian and Jing Yue were left in the cave. At this time, Jing Yue had completely lost her mind. Her body was constantly heating up like a burning flame. Nye Tian. The next moment, she suddenly stood up and threw herself at Nye Tian. Her mouth was unclear, but her breath smelled like orchids, charming and seductive. Nye Tian suddenly felt a dry heat spread in his body, and his breathing became rapid. He was not a saint, but a man. In such a situation, if he did not have any reaction, it would not mean that he was noble, but that he was sick. Nye Tian. Jing Yue's mouth was unclear, and her body kept moving. Nye Tian felt a burst of heat in his body, and a roar sounded in his head. He could no longer care too much about it. After the frenzy, everything returned to normal. Nye Tian stood up, looking a little embarrassed. Looking at Jing Yue, who was putting on her clothes, he whispered, Your Royal Highness, there's a reason for this. I know. Without waiting for Nye Tian to finish speaking, Jing Yue suddenly stepped forward and gently placed her fingers on Nye Tian's lip. Her pretty face was extremely red, and she whispered, Don't call me Your Royal Highness anymore. Call me Yue. Nye Tian was stunned for a moment, and his face slightly stiffened. It took him a long time to react. He gently reached out and hugged Jing Yue in his arms, saying lightly, Yue, I'll take responsibility until the end. Jing Yue nodded her head gently like a kitten. Royal sister. At this time, a hurried voice sounded, and then Jing Rue's figure appeared, along with the fat cat. The man and the cat were stunned to see Nye Tian and Jing Yue hugging each other, and then immediately turned their heads. Nye Tian and Jing Yue blushed and immediately separated, unable to hide the embarrassment on their faces. Royal sister, are you alright? After Jing Yue had tidied up everything, Jing Rue turned around and asked with an extremely unnatural expression. It's all right. Jing Yue regained her dignified demeanor and said with an elegant smile. Brother Nye, you. Jing Rue nodded and looked at Nye Tian. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched. He smiled and said, I'm fine too. Of course, he was fine. It was just that he hadn't completely accepted it yet. In fact, the biggest knot in Nye Tian's heart at the moment was still Cher, Emo Rushi, and the others. But now was not the time for him to think too much. Everything would have to wait until he met Emo Rushi and the others. A moment later, Nye Tian and the others walked out of the cave. Boss, are you guys alright? Ju Shan and Ju, he asked excitedly. Nye Tian smiled faintly and shook his head to indicate that he was fine. At this time, the others already knew what had happened. They looked at Nye Tian and Jing Yue with slightly unnatural eyes. Especially Ji Chou-Wu. His cold eyes actually revealed a faint sense of loss. Let's go. Let's leave this place first. Then, Nye Tian let out a long breath and said indifferently. They had stayed in this valley for a long time. They should leave immediately. Otherwise, it would be troublesome if Xiao Tang and the others caught up. You guys are really here. But at this time, in the void outside the valley, a low roar came from the void. Then, a figure appeared, standing coldly in midair. His eyes were filled with a bloodthirsty killing intent. It was the mysterious Sky Crown Prince, Xiao Tang. When Xiao Tang saw Nie Tian, his eyes were filled with blood-red killing intent. It was a kind of bone-deep killing intent that made one's heart tremble. He was not a fool. At this moment, seeing that Jing Yue was safe and sound, of course, he knew what had happened. Jing Yue was his fiancée and soon to become his wife. But now, she had become someone else's woman. How could he not be angry? Ever since he was young, Xiao Tang was not a greedy person. But his possessiveness was very strong. In his eyes, Jing Yue was his. No one else should even think about touching her. At this moment, Nie Tian had taken what belonged to him. This undoubtedly touched his reverse scale. Xiao Tang. Jing Rue's expression changed when he saw that it was Xiao Tang. He was instantly enraged. He growled and cursed, "You son of a b***tch, die." Jing Yue's importance to Jing Rue went without saying. When he found out that Jing Yue was under an illusion, he wanted nothing more than to kill Empress Xiantian and Crown Prince Xiantian. Now that Crown Prince Xiantian had appeared in front of him, how could he tolerate it? Boom! The moment he finished speaking, Jing Rue's figure moved. He struck out with his palm and his entire body charged forward. Jing Rue! Jing Yue's eyes widened and she screamed in shock. Jing Rue was not weak, but compared to Xiao Tang, he was much weaker. Courting death. Xiao Tang smirked when he saw Jing Rue charging at him. He struck out with his palm. Suddenly, a black claw appeared in the void, like a curtain that covered the sky, slammed down. Bam! Jing Rue's figure was sent flying by the impact without any strength to fight back, leaving a trail of blood in the air. Second Prince. Nie Tian's eyes trembled. He moved and flew into the air to catch Jing Rue. Jing Rue's face was pale. He was heavily injured, but his breathing was stable and his life was not in danger. He was only a level 2 demi-saint, while Xiao Tang was a level 8 demi-saint. The difference in strength between the two was more than half a level. Fortunately, Xiao Tang had attacked in a hurry. If he had used his full strength, Jing Rue would have been killed on the spot. Jing Rue, how are you? Jing Yue moved and came to Nie Tian's side. She looked at Jing Rue nervously. He's not in danger. Nie Tian nodded slightly. With a thought, he put Jing Rue into the 9 extremities. Jing Yue, what have you done? Xiao Tang roared furiously as he looked at Jing Yue with bloodshot eyes. Xiao Tang, you have the nerve to ask me. You should ask your queen mother what she did to me, Jing Yue replied coldly. Her eyes were cold, and the aura around her was surging. You bitch, you lost your chastity to another man just to survive. Xiao Tang certainly knew what Empress Xiantian had done to Jing Yue, but he hated Jing Yue more than anything else. He seemed to have lost his mind as he roared. Jing Yue's face was gloomy. It was obvious that she was furious. Although she had broken the illusion, she had not fully recovered. She could not even use half of her strength. If she were to fight Xiao Tang, she would definitely be at a disadvantage. Xiao Tang, from now on, Yue is my woman. I won't let anyone insult her. At this moment, Nie Tian suddenly took a step forward and stared coldly at Xiao Tang, saying word by word. At that moment, his entire body was emitting an extremely violent aura. The coldness in his eyes was so cold that it penetrated into one's bones. Your woman. Xiao Tang looked at Nie Tian. His eyes trembled and he was instantly enraged. He roared, Die! Chapter 28-29. Astral Resonance, Boom! The black claw descended from the sky towards Nie Tian. In the blink of an eye, Nie Tian felt the space around him tighten as an enormous pressure bore down on him, causing him to feel suffocated. Damn it! At that moment, Jing Yue bellowed and struck out with her palm as well. A crimson radiance appeared and shot towards the black claw. Kaboom! But in the very next moment, the crimson radiance was directly shattered. Jing Yue's body shuddered as she took a few steps back, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. Yue. Nie Tian's eyes darkened as he flew over to support Jing Yue. I'm fine. Jing Yue steadied herself and tried to hold on, but her body shuddered and she spat out a mouthful of dirty blood. Jing Yue, you've underestimated the Queen Mother's illusion. Xiao Tang stood in the air and stared at Jing Yue with his crimson eyes as he shouted coldly, even if you break the illusion, the power of the illusion night I will remain in your body for at least half a month. And your martial physique will not be able to completely recover within this half a month. Therefore, you are absolutely no match for me now. Ha ha. At the end of his speech, Xiao Tang laughed maniacally, looking extremely arrogant. Jing Yue's beautiful eyes trembled as she looked very unwilling. But she knew that Xiao Tang was right. She was indeed no match for him at the moment. Such a vicious illusion! Nie Tian exclaimed. Then, he turned to Yue and said, Step back, Yue. Leave this guy to me. Nie Tian, you. Jing Yue was stunned as she looked at Nie Tian in shock. She had to admit that Nie Tian was very talented and could be said to be the most terrifying person she had ever met. But Nie Tian's cultivation was too weak as he was only at the pinnacle of deity state. How could a pinnacle of deity state martial artist fight against a level 8 demi-saint? Brat, you're overestimating yourself. Xiao Tang sneered and said, Do you think this is still the jungle? Under the circumstances that there are no restrictions suppressing me, just based on trash with the strength of the deity realm like you, how can you fight this crown prince? It's not that I'm overestimating myself, it's that you overestimate yourself. Nie Tianling laughed and took a step forward. The sword aura around him surged and surged in the air. It was extremely powerful. If one were to judge from his imposing aura, then Nie Tian wasn't inferior to any 9th-rank half-saint right now. How is this possible? Xiao Tang's eyes widened when he saw this. He could not believe his eyes. Was a martial artist at the peak of the immortal state really so powerful? In fact, back in the dense forest, he was already very surprised by Nie Tian's battle prowess. After entering the forest, everyone else's strength would be greatly suppressed. However, Nie Tian was not suppressed at all. In fact, his aura had even grown stronger. This was too strange, and Xiao Tang could not figure it out no matter how he thought about it. What's in this brat's body? Xiao Tang's eyes were gloomy, and his heart felt cold. At this moment, even if Xiao Tang racked his brains, he could not figure out what was going on. Nie Tian found out not long ago that this mysterious heaven occult land was actually a piece of spacetime fragment of the starry sky holy world. The mysterious heaven occult land was filled with a strange power. This power had a suppressive effect on others, but it had a stimulating effect on Nie Tian. The main cornerstone of the starry sky holy world was in Nie Tian's body. Therefore, at this moment, even if they were not in the dense forest, the strength of others was also suppressed to a certain extent. It was just that it was not too obvious, and Nie Tian's strength was greatly stimulated. His aura was far more terrifying than under normal circumstances. The others were also very surprised by the sharp increase in Nie Tian's strength. Nie Tian, are you really going to fight with him? Jing Yue looked at Nie Tian and asked with a worried expression. Trust me. Nie Tian smiled faintly, his eyes firm and confident. Trust your mother. Upon seeing this, Xiao Tang was provoked. He let out an explosive roar and dashed forward with both of his palms. In the next moment, his aura burst forth, and wisps of dark aura surged out of his palms. Like rolling dark clouds, they pressed down on Nie Tian. Nie Tian frowned and slashed out with the starry sky slash. The sword's shadows whistled wildly, like a ray of light piercing through the darkness. For this sword strike, Nye Tian directly used the first of the Starry Sky 9 limits, the Mortal Killer move. Rumble! Chi chi chi! The sword's shadows slashed out violently, attacking the darkness that filled the sky. Even the void trembled slightly. How is this possible? The people in the valley were incomparably shocked when they saw this scene. Their faces were filled with disbelief. Who could believe that Nye Tian could actually fight head-on with Xiao Tang? Purring! However, in the next moment, a muffled sound came from the void. Nye Tian's silhouette was pushed back hundreds of meters. The starry wings appeared on his back and flapped madly to stabilize his body. The power of the stars in his body had increased by several times under the stimulation of the strange force in the void. However, compared to Xiao Tang's strength, it was still a little weaker. At this moment, Nye Tian's cultivation was roughly equivalent to that of a stage 5 demi-saint. Xiao Tang, on the other hand, was a stage 8 demi-saint after all. Even if he was slightly suppressed, his strength was still around that of a stage 5 demi-saint, which was one level higher than Nye Tian. Fortunately, Nye Tian was using the Starry Sky 9 limit. In this space, the power that he could unleash was also stimulated and even more powerful. Pft! In the air, Nye Tian stabilized his body and spat out a mouthful of filthy blood. His pale complexion had improved a lot. At this moment, there was no fear on his face. Instead, he was very excited. He could feel that the power of the stars in his body was becoming stronger under the stimulation of external forces. Rumble! In the starry domain, the domain origin formation was operating wildly. The 9 layers of stars shone brightly and dazzlingly. The scene of destruction was dazzling and dazzling. Nye Tian could feel that the power of the 900 billion stars seemed to have gone berserk, becoming active and powerful. At this moment, he could vividly feel the great power contained in each strand of the power of the stars. Fat Cat was right. Nye Tian had not even learned the basics of the power of the stars, and he had no idea how to bring out the true power of the stars. It was only at this moment that Nye Tian realized how terrifying the power of the stars could be. At this moment, Fat Cat and the Ghost Emperor's voices rang at the same time, exclaiming excitedly, "What a powerful resonance of the stars!" Resonance of the stars. Nye Tian was stunned for a moment. Then, his eyes trembled and blazed with passion. Before entering that dense forest, the Ghost Emperor had mentioned the resonance of the stars. It turned out that when the power of the stars was stimulated by external forces, it was the resonance of the stars. Nye Tian, you have to go all out and attack the limit of your martial body. See if you can achieve a breakthrough. Immediately, Fat Cat shouted excitedly. Breakthrough? The Ghost Emperor let out a strange cry and shouted, "You crazy cat! He just broke through a few days ago and you still want him to break through. Are you trying to kill him?" Little Ghost Emperor, Nye Tian's martial body is much stronger than you think. Fat Cat didn't care and said excitedly. He had been by Nye Tian's side for so long and knew Nye Tian very well. The more Nye Tian's martial body reached its limit, the more it could explode with unlimited potential. Perhaps this was why the Star Origin Stone had chosen Nye Tian back then. Chapter 28:30. The more you fight, the more courageous. When Nye Tian abruptly heard Fat Cat say that he could use the opportunity of the resonance of the stars to make a breakthrough, he immediately became excited. What he needed most at the moment was to improve his ability, and if he could ascend to the tier of demi-saint soon, his combat ability would undergo a qualitative change. He was confident that even if it was just a first-stage demi-saint, he would still be invincible in the tier of demi-saints. How could this be? Xiao Tang did not look pleased at all, even though he had wounded Nye Tian with a single palm strike. Instead, he looked very surprised and even a little wary. Even a demi-saint like Jing Rui was gravely wounded by his single palm strike. And yet, Nye Tian was merely a god pinnacle martial artist, and yet he was only lightly wounded. What was even more bizarre was that the aura around Nie Tian's body was actually skyrocketing wildly at the moment. What was going on? He was surprised, and so were the others. Jing Yue and the others were looking at Nie Tian, their eyes trembling violently. Nie Tian was becoming more and more frightening, and no one could understand him at all. "Keep attacking, Crown Prince Xiantian." That was when Nie Tianling sneered and taunted Xiao Tang. "Brat, you're courting death." Xiao Tang was enraged. With a loud roar, his figure moved in an instant. Waves of black aura surged out of his body and circulated around it, turning his entire being into a dark vortex in an instant. Bloodline power! Nie Tian could feel that Xiao Tang's aura had abruptly strengthened, and his eyes could not help but tremble as the corner of his mouth twitched. This time, Xiao Tang was truly enraged, and he began to use his bloodline power. Profound Heaven Slash! In the very next moment, Xiao Tang bellowed madly, and a massive black radiance appeared out of thin air. Like a giant black blade, it descended from the skies, its tremendous and sharp aura extremely frightening, as if it could cut through everything. "Watch out, Nie Tian!" Jing Yue could not help but gasp at the sight and cried out in shock. Xiao Tang's current aura was simply too frightening, and even Jing Yue would have to be careful against that profound heaven slash in her normal state. 9 limits of the starry sky, 3rd limit, heaven cleave. However, at this moment, Nie Tian wasn't afraid in the slightest. His lips curled up in a cold smile as he spoke. Astral energy gushed forth from his body, fusing with the fiend god energy. Under the stimulation of external forces, a terrifying aura erupted forth. Boom! Immediately after, a sword shadow appeared, like a giant dragon that had gone berserk. Boom! In the next instant, the two extreme forces collided, causing the space around them to tremble. The black light and the sword image shattered at the same time, transforming into huge waves that spread in all directions. Boom, boom, boom. In the void, violent waves surged to the sky, and the sky and earth became dark, as if it was the end of the world. Everyone was shocked and their eyes were trembling. They had never thought that the battle between Nie Tian and Xiao Tang would reach such a terrifying level. Bang! After a while, there was a muffled sound in the void, and a blood-colored figure flew out, drawing a blood-colored trail in the air, and then suddenly stopped. Nie Tian. Everyone's eyes trembled as they saw the blood-colored figure clearly. It was none other than Nie Tian. "I'm fine." Nie Tian stabilized his body. His whole body was dripping with blood, but the aura around him was even more terrifying, and it continued to skyrocket. Under the impact of the terrifying aura, the blood on his body slowly dissipated, and his whole person became even more fierce, like a sharp giant sword, standing in the sky. On the other hand, Xiao Tang's body was like a mountain, not moving an inch, and he was not injured at all. However, his face was very ugly, and his eyes changed from surprise to horror. He really couldn't figure out what was going on in front of him. Why, after he injured Nie Tian, the latter's aura didn't weaken, but instead increased. At this moment, Nie Tian's aura was several times stronger than before. At this rate, it would not take more than a few moves for Nie Tian's aura to surpass Xiao Tang's. At this moment, Nie Tian didn't feel any pain at all, and was instead extremely excited. Rumble, rumble, rumble. In the boundary of the Star River, the boundary origin formation revolved even more crazily. The star origin stone was like a heavenly pillar, constantly releasing a vast aura that permeated the 9 layers of Star River. The entire galaxy was filled with dazzling starlight. My aura now has probably reached the level of a stage 9 demi-saint. Nie Tian's eyes were trembling with excitement as he exclaimed in his heart. He felt that he had already reached the level of a stage 9 demi-saint, which was why he was now able to face a weaker demi-saint head-on. At the same time, however, he also felt a tearing pain all over his body, and the pain went deep into his bones. It was because the power released by the star stones was so strong that it was almost beyond the limits of his martial body. Still, Fat Cat had said that only by breaking through the limits of his martial body would there be a chance of achieving a true breakthrough. "Are you afraid, Crown Prince Yen Tian?" At this moment, Nye Tian smiled faintly, his brows slightly raised in a very provocative manner. He was getting braver the more he fought, and he was not afraid of Xiao Tang at all. "Afraid, my ass!" Xiao Tang roared and charged straight at him like a wild beast. His entire body was surrounded by mysterious heavenly qi that rolled like the sea and as vast as the mountains. Wherever his figure passed, the void around him was instantly pulled taut by him. Kaboom! In the next moment, Xiao Tang's palm landed, and a black ray whizzed out like a wild beast, tearing the space apart. The mysterious heavenly secret realm was a space-time fragment formed after the starry sky sacred realm was shattered in the first place. The space-time was not very stable, and under the influence of a huge force, it could easily collapse. Nye Tian frowned, and then his face darkened. Blood qi surged around his body, and the star heavenly slashed down, and a blood-colored sword shadow fell like a blood curtain. Rumble! Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Then, the huge forces collided and the void trembled. A weak space-time storm rushed out of the space-time crack, but it was directly crushed by the violent force. When everyone saw this, they could not help but gasp, and their expressions were extremely shocked. Bang, bang, bang. In the next moment, the muffled sounds in the void continued, and under the violent force, waves of violent force spread out. Nye Tian's figure retreated for 1,000 meters, and after he stabilized himself, he spat out a mouthful of blood. On the other side, Xiao Tang was also pushed back by the impact, and a trace of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. After he stabilized himself, his face was extremely pale. He was not injured, but he was too shocked. He never thought that in a head-on confrontation with Nye Tian, the latter could actually injure him. Boom! At this moment, a terrifying force suddenly erupted from Nye Tian's body, and it shot up to the sky. The force was so powerful that it made people tremble with fear. "What's going on?" The others were taken aback, and their expressions flickered as they fixed their eyes on Nye Tian. At the same time, Nye Tian felt something, and his eyes trembled with excitement, and he was pleasantly surprised. Chapter 28:31. Unsealing the primal stone within the boundaries of the Milky Way. Within the boundaries of the primary formation, a strange power of the primary formation surged towards the primal star stone in the center of the primary formation. After the primal star stone accepted the power of the primary formation, it began to emit a blinding light, like an exploding sun, incomparably dazzling. Nye Tian sensed everything that was happening within the boundaries of the Milky Way. His face was full of shock and his entire body stiffened. Boom! At the same time, a violent aura was released from his body, forming dazzling starlight ripples in the air. What is going on? The crowd below was completely dumbfounded. They did not know what was happening to Nye Tian. However, the crowd could feel that the aura that Nye Tian was releasing was very similar to the aura of the heavens and earth. At this moment, Nye Tian seemed to have merged with the heavens and earth. He was the absolute ruler of the heavens and earth. "Brat, die for me!" Just then, Xiao Tang suddenly roared. His silhouette moved and he violently struck out with his palm, intending to kill Nye Tian on the spot. However, the moment his palm descended, a strange scene occurred. Chi. Starlight ripples were released from Nye Tian. Wherever the ripples passed, the black claws were directly shattered. The scene before him caused Xiao Tang to suck in a breath of cold air. His expression was one of extreme shock. Bang! In the next moment, the starlight ripples spread over. After a muffled sound, Xiao Tang was directly sent flying. By the time he stabilized his body in the air, there was a deep wound on his chest. The wound was so deep that the bone could be seen. Blood gushed out incessantly. The starlight ripples did not seem to be anything special, but the power contained within them was actually so terrifying. Go! Xiao Tang's eyes were filled with hatred and unwillingness. However, he did not dare to attack Nie Tian again. With a low roar, his silhouette moved and he directly left. The crowd below looked at Nie Tian, their expressions completely lifeless. They did not know how to express the shock in their hearts. At this moment, Nie Tian's state was too strange and incomprehensible. Nie Tian stood in the air, while his spiritual consciousness entered the celestial river domain. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. And at this moment, the realm origin formation unceasingly released waves after waves of origin formation power, attacking the star origin stone. The astral origin stone grew brighter and brighter, more and more resplendent. The blinding light was so bright that Nie Tian couldn't even open his eyes. Nie Tian was incomparably shocked. He discovered that the densely packed spiritual runes on the surface of the astral origin stone had actually changed. Layers of spirit inscriptions began to peel off, like a spirit snake shedding its skin. What exactly is going on? Nie Tian was completely dumbfounded. The shock in his heart was incomparably deep. He had no idea what was happening above the astral origin stone. The star origin stone is being unsealed. At this moment, the figure of the fat cat appeared. Staring at the gigantic star origin stone, she spoke with a trembling voice. Unsealing the primordial stone? Nie Tian was stunned for a moment, and looked at the fat cat in confusion. Yes. The fat cat nodded heavily, and said excitedly, Nie Tian, you should have long discovered that these runes engraved on the star origin stone are actually a seal. You awaken the power of the stars, in fact, caused the runes on the seal to loosen. And at this moment, there is a resonance of the stars in your body, finally causing enough stimulation to the star origin stone, causing the star origin stone to begin unsealing. Nie Tian was taken aback, and his whole body froze. Just as the fat cat was speaking, layers of spirit inscriptions peeled off from the star origin stone. The huge star origin stone, like a withered tree in the spring, glowed with an incomparably great vitality. At this moment, the entire realm of the galaxy began to surge with a mysterious power, and in an instant, it filled the entire galaxy. After a long time, Nie Tian finally reacted, but his face was still stiff. He couldn't imagine what kind of seal could actually seal the star origin stone. One should know that the star origin stone was the main cornerstone of a sacred realm. The power contained within the star origin stone was unimaginable. Once this terrifying power was released, it could most likely destroy the entire myriad domain in an instant. Then, after a long time, the runes on the star origin stone finally disappeared completely. This also meant that the seal on the star origin stone had been completely unsealed. Then, the rumbling sound of the realm of the origin formation slowly faded, and gradually returned to normal. However, the entire realm of the galaxy had undergone an earth-shattering change. The endless space was filled with sparkling stars, and there was not a single trace of darkness. The realm of the galaxy was brand new, as if it had experienced a rebirth. Can I use the true power of the stars now? Nie Tian looked at the starry world in front of him, his eyes burning, and his voice trembling as he asked. Don't get too excited, try to sense the power of the stars. The fat cat calmed down at this moment and said with a faint smile. Nie Tian nodded and forced himself to calm down. With a thought, he sensed the power of the stars above the galaxy. At this time, he could finally see the true nature of the power of the stars. The power of the stars, like stars, flashed above the galaxy. From afar, it looked like a dense vortex of condensed starlight. Upon closer inspection, the starlight vortex seemed to contain an endless amount of power. There's nothing special. Nie Tian sensed for a long time, but didn't find anything. He couldn't help but frown at the fat cat. Don't rush, calm down, hold your breath, and sense carefully. The fat cat smiled faintly, looking very mysterious. Nye Tian nodded, took 3 deep breaths and completely calmed down. After a while, he sensed the power of the stars, and the expression on his face became more and more surprised, and more shocked. He actually sensed that every strand of star power was like a galaxy. Starlight piled up layer by layer, condensing into a huge vortex, and at the deepest part of the vortex there was actually a dazzling white star like the brightest gem. Fat, what's going on? Nye Tian was stunned for a full 10 seconds, and then he forced himself to calm down a little. He looked at the fat cat and asked, could it be that the star in the deepest part of the starlight vortex is the real power of the stars? Yes. The fat cat nodded, a serious expression on its face. This. Nye Tian took a deep breath and was stunned for a long time again. Then he asked, then what is the starlight on the outer layer of the power of the stars? What do you think it is? The fat cat didn't answer Nye Tian, but asked instead. I don't know. Nye Tian shook his head. Although he had a guess in his heart, he didn't dare to confirm it. The starlight layer by layer, closely and seamlessly surrounded the power of the stars. It was very strange. It's the star mark. The fat cat was silent for a long time, and finally said with a strange smile. Chapter 28:32. Star mark dark seal. Suddenly hearing fat cat mention star mark, Nye Tian didn't understand what it meant, and couldn't help but be stunned. Star mark is the dark side under the starlight. Fat cat's expression became much more serious at this time, and said in a deep voice, light and darkness are born from each other, fusing and restraining each other. Where there is light, there will be darkness. Even the power of the stars can't get rid of the entanglement of darkness. The layers of star mark you see are formed by the accumulation of the darkness of the power of the stars over the years. Although you have awakened the power of the stars, you can't unleash the true power of the stars, because the power of the stars is shrouded by the star mark. So that's how it is. Nye Tian's expression couldn't help but change, and his eyes couldn't help but flicker. He didn't expect that the seemingly bright star mark was actually the darkness under the starlight. Nye Tian, actually, the star mark has another name. At this time, Fat Cat spoke again, saying 4 words, star mark dark seal. Star mark dark seal? Nye Tian was stunned for a moment, and then his eyes trembled as he understood. The star mark was the darkness under the starlight, and it was precisely because of the existence of the star mark that Nye Tian couldn't unleash the powerful power of the stars. Therefore, the star mark was like a seal placed on the power of the stars, suppressing the power of the stars. If he could break the star mark dark seal, then the power of the stars would naturally be unleashed. You're right. Fat Cat looked at Nye Tian, and guessed what the latter was thinking. She smiled faintly and said, the star mark dark seal is a huge obstacle to unleashing the power of the stars, and you have awakened the power of 900 billion stars. What you need to do next is to break the star mark dark seal layer by layer. When Nye Tian heard what Fat Cat said, his eyes couldn't help but become fiery, and his mind recalled the mighty voice when the star original stone awakened. The power of the stars, the origin of power, could shatter the void and destroy the heavens. The strength of 100,000 stars could shake a mountain. The strength of 1,000,000 stars could destroy the earth. The strength of 10 million stars could destroy the sky. The strength of 100 million stars could shatter the void. The strength of 1,000,000,000 stars. When he first awakened the power of the stars, he felt very strange in his heart. Why was it that he was still so weak when he had awakened billions of stars? So the real reason was the existence of the star mark dark seal. As the saying goes, everything has 2 extremes, and everything has 2 sides. Everything in the world existed in opposition to each other. Void, reality, yin, yang, the universe, the heavens, the earth, water, fire, light, darkness, good and evil, all of them were the same. Even the most dazzling star power would be enveloped by the star mark. After understanding all of this, Nye Tian suddenly felt as if a door leading to everything had been opened in front of him. Nye Tian, the star origin stone, is the main cornerstone of a sacred realm. The power contained in it is unimaginable. Fat Cat looked at Nye Tian and smiled faintly. The moment you see the star mark is the true beginning of your path to the stars. Awakening the power of 900 billion stars was only the first step to unlocking the star origin stone. At this moment, the huge resonance of the stars had truly unlocked the star origin stone. Next, Nye Tian would truly embark on his own path to the stars. Since the star mark dark seal can suppress the power of the stars, its power must be very terrifying. I don't know what can break the star mark dark seal. After a while, Nye Tian became cold and said in a deep voice, Nye Tian, who do you think that old man Hua is? Fat Cat glanced at Nye Tian and did not answer his question. Instead, she suddenly asked Huairu, Old man Hua. Nye Tian was stunned for a moment and then fell into deep thought. His eyes changed from puzzlement to passion. After a few seconds, Nye Tian's eyes trembled and he exclaimed, Could old man Hua be a star emissary? I think that old man Hua must be a star emissary. Fat Cat chuckled and then her figure moved and she directly returned to the origin embryo space. However, her voice still sounded. Otherwise, how could he know that the mysterious Heaven Mystery Land is a fragment of the stars? How could he know that there is a heavenly meteorite in the mysterious Heaven Mystery Land? Nye Tian was stunned for a moment. His eyes could not stop trembling and his face was full of shock. In fact, from the moment Huairu appeared, he had been guessing the latter's identity. Huairu suddenly appeared and had been helping Nye Tian. This was obviously not without reason. Nye Tian previously thought that Huairu's identity was most likely a star emissary. However, he was not sure. Now, it seemed that Huairu was definitely a star emissary. Huairu knew that the heavenly meteorite was in the mysterious Heaven Mystery Land and had carefully arranged everything so that Nye Tian could come to the mysterious Heaven Mystery Land. Nye Tian even felt that his unsealing of the star origin stone at this moment was also within Huairu's expectations. Old man Hua wants me to take the heavenly meteorite away. Why? Then, Nye Tian frowned and wondered in his heart. The next moment, he thought of something. His eyes trembled and he said in surprise, Could it be that the heavenly meteorite can break the star mark dark seal? Huairu was so eager to get the heavenly meteorite, it must be of great use. Nye Tian had already unsealed the star origin stone. The next most important thing was to find a way to break the star mark dark seal. Therefore, he guessed that the function of the heavenly meteorite was to break the star mark dark seal. Old man Hua, you are really good at scheming. Nye Tian understood everything. His eyes trembled slightly and the corners of his mouth twitched. He couldn't help but admire Huairu for being such a shrewd person. Nye Tian, you're really lucky to have met an extremely cunning messenger of the starry sky. Little Fat Cat chuckled and said sourly. Even he admired Huairu's scheming. Nye Tian nodded slightly and couldn't help but smile. So far, he had met 3 of the 9 messengers of the stars. The Emperor of Light, Old Ancestor Divine Heaven, and Huairu. All 3 of them were at the pinnacle of the world. Nye Tian couldn't help but look forward to what the other messengers of the stars would be like. After a while, Nye Tian finally calmed down and his consciousness left the galactic realm. At this time, in the valley, the others were looking at Nye Tian with a horrified expression, as if they were looking at a monster. In their eyes, Nye Tian was indeed a monster. The fact that Nye Tian was able to defeat Xiao Tang, who was an 8th stage demi-saint, was too strange. In the last scene, the ripples of starlight that Nye Tian had unleashed were incomparably terrifying. Xiao Tang had been severely injured, and had been forced to flee. Are you guys alright? Nye Tian's figure landed. His eyes swept across the crowd, and he smiled faintly. It was only then that the crowd came to their senses. It took a long time for their expressions to return to normal. Nie Tian took a deep breath and looked inside his body. He found that his strength was still at the peak of the immortal realm and had not broken through. It seemed that the star resonance just now was not strong enough to help him break through to the demi-saint realm. However, he was not depressed. He firmly believed that when he broke the star-marked dark seal, he would definitely break through to the demi-saint realm. As long as he could get the heavenly meteorite, breaking the star-marked dark seal would not be difficult. Chapter 28:33. Meteor Formation. Nie Tian suddenly turned around and looked at the cave behind him. His eyes narrowed and his expression became a little strange. Nie Tian, what's wrong? Jing Yuwei stepped forward and asked when she saw Nie Tian's strange expression. There's something strange about this cave. Nie Tian replied and walked into the cave. After entering the cave, Nie Tian suddenly felt that the star energy within his body seemed to have a trace of movement, and this caused him to feel even more puzzled. Just now, he and Jing Yuwei had done something in this cave. But at that time, the star origin stone in his body had not been unsealed, so he did not feel anything strange. But at this moment, he felt that the cave seemed to be filled with a strange power. This power seemed to have some kind of resonance with the astral energy in his body. Nie Tian vaguely felt that there was something in the cave that was calling out to him. Nie Tian, what do you feel? The fat cat couldn't sense any external forces, but she could sense some changes in Nie Tian's body. She couldn't help but ask nervously, Fatty, there seems to be a force inside this cave that can actually resonate with the power of the stars. Nie Tian frowned as he walked towards the interior of the cave. The more he walked forward, the more he felt that the star energy in his body was becoming more and more active. It seemed that even the star-marked dark seal was becoming restless, and there were even signs of it loosening. Could it be the heavenly meteorite stone? Fat Cat's expression changed as she shouted in surprise. When Nie Tian heard the words meteorite stone, his eyes lit up and he said excitedly, Let's go inside the cave and take a look. He now knew that the meteorite stone was very likely to be the thing that could break the star-scar dark seal. How could he not be excited? Jing Yuwei and the others followed closely behind Nie Tian. They did not have any star energy in their bodies. Therefore, the deeper they went into the cave, the more they felt the suppression in the air was getting stronger and stronger. After a while, Nie Tian finally reached the end of the cave. At this moment, there was nothing in front of him except the black mountain wall. Strange! Nie Tian's face was filled with doubt. His expression was extremely strange as he said, I clearly felt that power was extremely strong. Why is there nothing? Nie Tian, let's try blasting this mountain wall apart. At this time, the little fat cat opened its mouth and said in a low voice, All right. Nie Tian was taken aback at first, but then his eyes focused and he nodded. In the next moment, the sword intent in his body surged out, and the starlight heaven slashed out violently. The sword's shadow whistled like a dragon, bombarding the mountain wall in front of him. Boom! Rumble! A loud rumbling sound rang out, and the entire cave shook violently, as if it was about to collapse. Immediately after, the sword's shadow pierced deep into the mountain wall, and forcibly opened up a path. Nie Tian passed through the passageway and saw a bright light. His eyes trembled and he exclaimed in surprise, There really is a mystery behind the mountain wall. Then, he directly entered the passageway and walked forward. But Jing Yuwei and the others stopped at this moment. They felt that the pressure in the air was even stronger. If they continued to walk forward, they would not be able to resist at all. Nie Tian turned around and looked at the others, then waved his hand to signal them to wait in the cave. Then, he walked towards the bright place at the other end of the passageway. The deeper he went, the more he felt the star-marked dark seal trembling in his body. It seemed that the star-marked dark seal could be unsealed at any time. After a while, he came to the other side of the passageway. Boom! At this moment, a huge wave suddenly appeared in the space, and it directly penetrated into his body. At this moment, Nye Tian felt that the star-streaked dark seal was shaking even more violently, which actually made him feel as if his blood was boiling with excitement. Then, he took a step forward, and the world in front of him suddenly widened. He looked around and immediately found that he was hundreds of thousands of meters above the sky. It turned out that after he passed through the mountain wall, he had come to the other side of the huge mountain. In the next moment, he felt a strange aura coming from below. His eyes suddenly trembled and he looked down. This is... The scene in front of him made Nye Tian's eyes tremble. His whole body froze and he was extremely shocked. In the vast space below, there was a huge formation floating in the air. Countless boulders that looked like mountains were actually burning with meteoric flames as they floated in the air. Meteorites. Nye Tian calmed down a little. Looking at the boulders burning with meteorite fire, he exclaimed with trembling eyes, "Meteorites!" These boulders seemed to be meteorites that fell from distant space, and even the meteorite fire had not been extinguished. In the next moment, Nye Tian's figure moved, and he approached the burning meteorite. At this moment, he felt an ancient, majestic, vast, and majestic aura rushing towards him. It wrapped his whole body, and made him enter a mysterious state. After approaching the countless meteorites, Nye Tian's figure froze. Only then did he realize that these meteorites were arranged in a very mysterious way. All the meteorites were connected, and like a spiral, layer by layer, they extended inward. This is a big formation. Suddenly, Nye Tian came to a realization, and his face suddenly changed, and he was extremely shocked. These meteorites had a radius of several thousand meters. They were like mountains, and any one of them was extremely heavy. It was hard to imagine what kind of person could arrange these huge meteorites and build a big formation of meteorite. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice was heard, and she shouted excitedly, "Nye Tian, look carefully. What is in the center of the big formation?" At this moment, Fat Cat's voice was heard, and she shouted excitedly, "Nye Tian, look carefully. What is in the center of the big formation?" In the center of these spiral meteorites, there was a white crystal the size of a baby's fist. This white crystal was too small, and when placed among the huge meteorites, it was like a small stone among thousands of mountains. However, when Nye Tian tried to sense the white crystal, his face suddenly changed, and he was completely stunned. Although the white crystal was small, it contained a very large amount of life energy. Upon closer inspection, it was like a vast, endless ocean. Nye Tian's expression flickered with astonishment as he sucked in a deep breath. He could not imagine that such a small crystal could contain such a majestic and endless energy. This white crystal, what is it? Just when Nye Tian was at the peak of his shock, Fat Cat's voice was suddenly heard. "Nye Tian, look carefully, what does this big formation look like?" Nye Tian was stunned at first, and then he immediately reacted. He forced himself to calm down, and began to sense the whole big formation of meteorite. After a moment, his face suddenly froze, and he said in shock, "This is the power of the stars?" These huge meteorites, layer by layer, surrounded the white crystal, which made Nye Tian think of the power of the stars that he had sensed not long ago. The power of the stars was a vortex of starlight, with layers of star-marked dark seals on the outside, and the innermost part was the power of the stars. The structure of the power of the stars was exactly the same as the big formation in front of him. These meteorites were the star-marked dark seals, and the white in the center was the power of the stars. Chapter 28:34. A Sudden Misfortune. Heavenly Meteorite. Nye Tian suddenly realized that the white crystal stone in the middle of the great meteorite formation was the heavenly meteorite he was looking for. Yes. Fat Cat nodded and said, "This white crystal stone must be the heavenly meteorite." The great meteorite formation was arranged according to the power of the stars. So, this was obviously not a coincidence. Therefore, the white crystal stone in the core of the formation must be the heavenly meteorite that could break the star-marked dark seal. Fat, I'm going to get the heavenly meteorite now. Tian became cold after a while. His eyes were glowing with excitement. His figure moved, and he was ready to enter the great meteorite formation to get the heavenly meteorite. Wait! However, Fat Cat was a little nervous at this time. So, she anxiously shouted, "What's wrong?" Tian was stunned for a moment, and asked in astonishment. "This great meteorite formation is definitely a Sage Realm formation. You're just going to die if you break in like this," Fat Cat said angrily. Then, she began to sense the great meteorite formation. Tian calmed down. He wasn't in a hurry. So, he quietly waited for Fat Cat. Fat Cat sensed the great meteorite formation. After a while, dense beads of sweat seeped out of his forehead, and his complexion became paler and paler. "Fat, are you okay?" Tian's complexion changed as he saw this. So, he anxiously shouted. Fat Cat's body swayed a little. Then, he gasped for breath. It took a long time for him to calm down. Then, he said, "This formation is too strange. I feel like I've fallen into an abyss with my divine sense." Humph! Suddenly, the Ghost Emperor sneered and said, "Fat Cat, you only have 7 tails. You want to sense such a huge holy formation? You're overestimating yourself." "Bastard!" The Fat Cat heard the Ghost Emperor speak and scolded. "You little demon, you only know how to make sarcastic remarks. If you have the ability, why don't you decipher this formation diagram?" "Humph!" The Ghost Emperor sneered. "We can't break this meteor formation, but we can't. Perhaps only Tian has a chance of cracking it." "Tian? Me?" Fat Cat and Tian exclaimed at the same time when they heard the Ghost Emperor's words. They didn't know what the latter meant. Even the Fat Cat and the Ghost Emperor were unable to break the formation, so how could Tian, who knew almost nothing about formations, break it? "It's Tian." The Ghost Emperor, however, had a serious expression on his face as he said, "This grand spell formation was built according to star power. As long as Tian can sense star power carefully, even if he can't decipher the spell formation, he'll have no problem entering it." The Fat Cat frowned and hesitated after hearing the Ghost Emperor's words. At this moment, they were facing a saint spell formation. If Tian were to enter it without knowing the blueprint of the spell formation, he would definitely be crushed to death if he wasn't careful. It was too risky to enter the formation like this. The Ghost Emperor knew what the Fat Cat was worried about, so he said with a cold smile, "Risks are unavoidable when doing great things. If you hesitate, when will you become an expert?" "I'll enter the formation." Tian's eyes trembled when he heard the Ghost Emperor's words. He said seriously, "For the heavenly meteorite, it's worth the risk." The Fat Cat's eyes trembled. She wanted to say something, but she didn't. Tian took a few deep breaths and calmed himself down completely. Then, his eyes darkened and he stepped into the meteorite formation with determination. Boom! 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 The instant he entered the grand meteorite array, the entire array shook. After that, the meteorites around him began to burn intensely. The meteorite fire in the space became incomparably hot, and the surrounding space directly turned into a huge furnace. Tian felt the hot air rushing toward him, as if it was going to burn him. He frowned slightly, but he didn't care too much. Instead, he focused his divine sense on the power of the stars. Then, he followed the lines of the power of the stars and compared them to the formation lines of the meteorite formation. He slowly approached the formation. His method was stupid, but it was very safe. As long as he paid attention, he wouldn't trigger the formation's killing intent. Next, Tian inched closer to the center of the grand spell formation. The closer he got, the fiercer the meteorite fire became. After a while, his body was drenched in sweat. His face was red and his body was extremely hot. It was very uncomfortable, and he was about to suffocate. Nye Tian, you must hold on. The fat cat sensed that Nye Tian's breathing was a little unstable, and she couldn't help but worry. The Ghost Emperor's face was also very ugly. He was afraid that Nye Tian would make a mistake and make a mistake. At this time, Nye Tian had to be extremely focused, and he also had to endure the burning of the meteorite fire. The situation was very dangerous. Fortunately, Nye Tian's martial body was strong, and his mental strength was also much stronger than ordinary people. After a long time, he finally arrived at the center of the meteorite formation. He was only a few meters away from the white crystal. At that moment, Nye Tian had a clearer sense of the boundless power within him. It was boundless and boundless. Meteorite stone. His eyes suddenly narrowed, and he stared at the white crystal, and the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. Nye Tian, do it! At this time, the fat cat and the Ghost Emperor's voices sounded almost at the same time, urging him. Yes. Nye Tian nodded heavily, and walked step by step toward the meteorite stone. Finally, he stretched out his hand and grabbed it. Stop! However, at this moment, a deep and powerful voice resounded high up in the sky, and it was filled with great anger. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed, and then he looked up into the sky. An old man in black appeared and directly slapped down. Suddenly, the void space shook, and the sky changed color. A vast and mighty power came down, and the rolling power seemed to be able to destroy everything. What a terrifying power! Seeing this, Nye Tian's eyes trembled, and he exclaimed in his heart. The aura of the old man in black was actually stronger than that of the 3 elders of the Holy Soul sect. Obviously, he was a rank 9 pseudo-sacred expert. He didn't expect that at this time, such a powerful figure would suddenly appear. Nye Tian, don't worry about him, take the meteorite stone. The fat cat's voice sounded again, and she shouted nervously. Okay. Nye Tian responded, and directly put his hand down, and directly held the meteorite stone in his hand. At this moment, he suddenly felt that the meteorite stone released a wave of power, which rushed into his body, and instantly gathered into the star original stone. The sudden change made Nye Tian's face sink, and his whole body stiffened. Boom! At the same time, a huge shadow of a palm appeared in the sky. It was like a falling mountain. The terrifying aura caused the surrounding space to groan. However, just as the giant palm was about to fall, something strange happened. Boom! The meteorite formation seemed to feel something, and suddenly shook, and the surrounding void began to tremble. Chapter 28:35 Ancestor Xian Tianhe? Up in the sky, the black-robed elder's eyes narrowed and his expression changed when he saw the countless meteorites flying towards him. He had never expected such a strange and terrifying turn of events. Bang! 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 Then, the giant meteorites collided with the giant palm. In just an instant, the giant palm collapsed. Oh no! The black-robed elder's eyes trembled as he sensed that something was wrong. He screamed and retreated frantically. Unfortunately, he was one step too late. Boom, boom, boom. Huge meteorites came crashing down, and the violent meteorite fire spread into a sea of fire, burning the entire sky. Bang, bang, bang. The black-robed elder's body was agile and he dodged the meteorites head-on. However, he could not avoid the meteorite fire. He was hit repeatedly. Nye Tian watched the scene in the sky from below. He was stunned and speechless for a long time. After a while, all the meteorites flew into the sky and disappeared into the meteorite fire. The black-robed elder, after enduring the endless meteorite fire, was in a sorry state. His body was covered in blood and wounds. His hair was messy and he looked like a madman. One had to admit that the black-robed elder was indeed strong. He was able to survive the impact of so many meteorite fire. Nye Tian stood rooted to the ground. He stared straight at the black-robed elder, still holding the meteorite stone in his hand. "Young man, who are you?" At this time, the black-robed elder steadied himself and his complexion improved slightly. His murky eyes were filled with sharpness as he stared at Nyetian. Nyetian finally reacted. He calmed down but did not answer the black-robed elder. Instead, he asked, "Who are you?" Just now, when he held the sky meteorite stone in his hand, he felt a huge force surging into the star origin stone. However, this force disappeared without a trace in an instant, as if it had never existed. Nyetian was very surprised. However, this was not the time to think about this. Right now, he had to face the furious black-robed elder. He did not know who the black-robed elder was and why he had appeared in the mysterious Heaven Mystery Land. However, he could tell that the black-robed elder was a super expert and was obviously very angry at him for taking the meteorite stone. Even though the black-robed elder was slightly injured by the meteorite fire, it was still a piece of cake for him to kill Nyetian. "I am the mysterious Heaven Ancestor." The black-robed old man's face darkened as he spoke coldly. His eyes were blazing with rage, and he wished for nothing more than to eat Nyetian alive. "Patriarch Profound Heaven?" Nyetian went blank for a moment, his eyes flickering with astonishment. He could not believe that the black-robed elder was actually the ancestor. He had never thought that the black-robed elder was the mysterious Heaven Ancestor. Who would have thought that such an ancient figure was actually still alive? No wonder the black-robed old man had been so furious when Nyetian had taken the heavenly meteor. It turned out that he was Patriarch Profound Heaven. The reason why the black-robed elder was so angry when Nyetian took the meteorite stone was because he was the mysterious Heaven Ancestor. He had discovered the mysterious Heaven Mystery Land and cultivated there. With the help of the meteorite formation, he eventually became one of the strongest cultivators in the sacred soul realm. Now, Nyetian had suddenly appeared and destroyed the meteorite formation. He even wanted to take the meteorite stone. How could the mysterious Heaven Ancestor not be angry? "Kid, you're not from the Shao clan. Who are you?" The mysterious Heaven Ancestor roared furiously. He had not made a move yet because he wanted to know who Nyetian was. "Please calm down, Senior. I am Nyetian, a guest of the mysterious Heaven Empire. I followed the Crown Prince into the mysterious Heaven Mystery Land." Nyetian narrowed his eyes and said calmly. The most important thing now was to calm the mysterious Heaven Ancestor down. Besides, what Nyetian had said was not wrong. The mysterious Heaven Ancestor was taken aback. His eyes trembled as he said in a deep voice, "Kid, do you think I'm a 3-year-old? Tell me, why did you come to the mysterious Heaven Mystery Land?" Nyetian frowned and his heart sank. This old man was indeed difficult to deal with. "Nyetian, tell him that you are the owner of the meteorite stone," the fat cat suddenly said to Nyetian. Nyetian's expression changed. He looked at the mysterious Heaven Ancestor without hesitation and said, "Since Senior has asked, I will tell you the truth. I am the owner of the meteorite stone. I came to the mysterious Heaven Mystery Land for the meteorite stone." The mysterious Heaven Ancestor's face sank when he heard Nyetian's words. After a moment of silence, his eyes turned cold as he growled, "Bullshit! I was the one who discovered the mysterious Heaven Mystery Land. The meteorite stone belongs to the mysterious Heaven Mystery Land. You're so young. What right do you have to say that you are the owner of the meteorite stone?" As smart as Nyetian was, he smiled faintly and said, "Because I can enter the Grand Meteor Formation." Patriarch Dark Heaven froze in place. He didn't kill Nyetian right away because he wanted to figure out Nyetian's identity. On the other hand, it was strange to see Nyetian appear in the meteorite formation. He had stayed in the mysterious Heaven Mystery Land for nearly 1,000,000 years, but could only absorb energy from outside the meteorite formation. He couldn't enter the formation at all. Nyetian was only at the peak of the immortal state. How could he enter the formation? He couldn't figure it out. What was even weirder was that all of the meteors started to fly towards him in unison, as if they were protecting him. Could this kid really be the owner of the meteorite stone? The mysterious heaven ancestor's eyes trembled when he thought of this. However, in the next moment, his face turned cold. His eyes were fixed on the heavenly meteorite in Yetion's hand, greed and desire filling his eyes. Of course, he knew that the meteorite stone contained unimaginable power. However, he couldn't enter the meteorite formation, so he couldn't obtain the meteorite stone. Now that Yetion had obtained the heavenly meteor, he had done him a great favor. Now, he just needed to snatch the meteorite stone. Kid, I don't care if you're telling the truth or not. You trespassed into the mysterious heaven mystery land, destroyed the meteorite formation, and tried to take the meteorite stone. This is a great crime, the mysterious heaven ancestor said cold and charged toward Yetion. In the next moment, Patriarch Profound Heaven came to a stop and fixed his cold eyes on Yetion, killing intent filling his eyes. You'll die here today. Yetion's eyes narrowed and his face turned very grim. How could he not see that the mysterious heaven ancestor wanted the meteorite stone? Yetion, give him the sky meteor stone. Little Fat Cat's voice sounded again, this time with a strange tone. Yetion was stunned at first. Then, he threw the meteorite stone at the mysterious heaven ancestor without hesitation and said, Mysterious heaven ancestor, you want the meteorite stone. I'll give it to you. Ah! The mysterious heaven ancestor was shocked and screamed. When he saw the meteorite stone flying toward him, he reached out and grabbed it. Chapter 28:36. The end is near. Forefather Mysterious Sky obtained the meteorite, but there was no joy on his old face. Instead, it was as ugly as a withered chrysanthemum. Brat, what did you do to the meteorite? Forefather Mysterious Sky's eyes darkened as he cold glared at Yetion and roared. He felt that there was no power in the heavenly meteorite stone at all. It was as if he was holding an ordinary stone. I didn't do anything. Yetion smiled faintly and said, I've already told you that I'm the owner of the heavenly meteorite. Now that I'm here, it's impossible for you to absorb power from it. Bullshit. Forefather Mysterious Sky growled. He obviously didn't believe Yetion's words. Yetion said calmly, If you don't believe me, you can feel the meteorite and see if you can sense any power from it. Forefather Mysterious Sky's face darkened as he carefully sensed the meteorite. There was no aura of power from it. I don't believe you. After a while, he roared like a wild beast that was about to go berserk. So what if you don't believe me? Yetion smiled and said, You can give me the meteorite and I will prove to you that I am the true master of the meteorite. Forefather Mysterious Sky was stunned for a moment, then he said in a cold tone, Brat, I want to see what you have up your sleeve. With these words, he threw the heavenly meteor to Yetion. Anyway, Yetion was just a small fry at the peak of the immortal state. He couldn't do anything. If Yetion tried anything funny, he would just kill him. With a faint smile, Yetion took the heavenly meteor. As a thought entered his mind, the origin formation in his starry river began to operate madly. At that moment, the meteorite stone sensed something and began to release waves of tremendous life force. It instantly filled the surroundings, and it was extremely mysterious. This. Patriarch Dark Heaven's eyes widened in astonishment. In his hands, the heavenly meteorite had no power at all, but in Yetion's hands, it could actually release such a terrifying power. It was really too strange. Yetion withdrew his aura and said with a faint smile, Forefather Profound Heaven, do you believe that I am the owner of the meteorite stone now? Everything he had done just now had been secretly guided by the little fat cat. There seemed to be a mysterious connection between the heavenly meteorite stone and the star origin stone. As long as Yetion stopped operating the domain origin formation, the heavenly meteorite stone would not release any energy aura. Nye Tian was very curious. When he held the sky meteorite for the first time, what was the energy released by the sky meteorite that was absorbed by the star origin stone? Forefather Dark Heaven stood rooted to the ground, his face extremely gloomy as if he was thinking about something. After a while, he sneered and said, "Boy, so what if you are the owner of the meteorite stone? Do you really think that you can leave this place alive?" Nye Tian frowned. The corner of his lips twitched as he said, "Forefather Dark Heaven, the meteorite formation has been destroyed. You won't be able to change anything even if you kill me. If I die, the meteorite stone will become a useless piece of rock. Is that what you want to see?" Forefather Dark Heaven's expression stiffened. His eyes flickered as he sneered. "Boy, just say what you want to say. There's no need to beat around the bush. Forefather Dark Heaven, I want to make a deal with you." Nye Tian smiled calmly without the slightest hint of panic. "A deal?" Forefather Dark Heaven was startled for a moment before he sneered. "Brat, who do you think you are? What gives you the right to make a deal with me?" "Because I am the owner of the meteorite stone and can help you break through to the Sage Realm. Is that enough?" Nye Tian smiled faintly as he repeated what Fat Cat had told him. Forefather Dark Heaven's eyes froze as he froze when he heard Nye Tian's words. He even suspected that he had heard wrong. Nye Tian had said that he could help him break through to the Sage Realm. All the martialists in the infinite domain, especially those who had reached the peak pseudo-sacred realm, didn't want to break through to the Sage Realm. However, in the long history of the infinite domain, no one had ever broken through to the Sage Realm. Although there were countless realms in the infinite domain, they were still realms that couldn't support the existence of a Sage Realm. "Boy, you might be able to fool others with your words, but do you think it's possible to fool me?" Forefather Dark Heaven's expression darkened as he spoke cold. He didn't believe that a mere peak godly state martialist could help him break through to the Sage Realm. "Forefather Dark Heaven, if I'm not wrong, you're over 1,000,000 years old, right?" Nye Tian smiled faintly as he looked at Forefather Dark Heaven, and said. Forefather Dark Heaven was stunned for a moment before he asked cold, "So what?" He was indeed over 1,000,000 years old. This was the limit of a martialist's lifespan below the Sage Realm. 1,000,000 years was already the limit of a martialist's lifespan. Even peak pseudo-sacred realm martialists rarely lived to 1,000,000 years old. Forefather Dark Heaven being able to live to 1,000,000 years old was indeed an exception. It was obvious that the reason he was able to live so long was because he had been absorbing the energy of the meteorite formation all year round. "Forefather Dark Heaven, you're already at the end of your lifespan, aren't you?" Nye Tian smiled faintly and said. "You." Forefather Dark Heaven was so shocked that he couldn't speak for a moment. He was indeed approaching the end of his lifespan. When a martialist reached the peak pseudo-sacred realm, they would have a keen sense of their lifespan. Forefather Dark Heaven knew that he could only live for a few more years at most. He would definitely die within a few years. Even a peak pseudo-sacred realm martialist wouldn't be able to fight against the heavens and earth. However, he had concealed his aura very well. How could Nye Tian tell that he was approaching the end of his lifespan? "Forefather Dark Heaven, to show my sincerity, I can extend your lifespan by 100 years. Nye Tian smiled faintly as he stared at Forefather Dark Heaven. "Really?" Forefather Dark Heaven's murky eyes suddenly narrowed and flickered brightly. "Of course." Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, "If you don't believe me, I can do it right now." Forefather Dark Heaven was stunned for a moment before he stared cautiously at Nye Tian. It was obvious that he was worried that Nye Tian would trick him and give him a fatal blow when he wasn't paying attention. Nye Tian could tell that Forefather Dark Heaven was confused. He smiled faintly and was about to say something. However, at that moment a scream was heard. "Nye Tian." The elegant voice was very familiar, but there was a hint of panic in it. It was Jing Yue. "Yue." Nye Tian's eyes trembled. He looked up into the sky and saw Jing Yue's figure. Jing Rui and the others were also standing next to Jing Yue. Behind them were two familiar figures, Empress Xiantian and Crown Prince Xiantian. Jing Yue and the others were pale as a sheet. They were obviously under the control of Empress Dark Heaven and Crown Prince Dark Heaven. Nie Tian did not expect Empress Dark Heaven to also come and control Jing Yue and the others.